Meeting to order for May 19th, 2025. Mr. Kelly, would you lead us in the flag salute? Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Mr. Smith, will you do the land acknowledgement?
I'd be happy to, Madam Mayor. We would like to acknowledge that the city and borough of Juneau is on Tlingit land and wish to honor the indigenous people of this land. For more than 10,000 years, Alaska Native people have been and continue to be integral to the well-being of our community. We are grateful to be in this place, a part of this community, and to honor the culture, traditions, and resilience of the Tlingit people. Gunischish.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Madam Clerk, will you call roll?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Ms. Hall. Here. Mr. Steininger. Ms. Adkisson.
Here.
Mr. Kelly.
Here.
Ms. Wall.
Present.
Ms. Hughes Scandies.
Here.
Mr. Bryson.
Present.
Deputy Mayor Smith.
Here.
And Mayor Weldon.
Here.
A quorum is present.
And yes, I've already told the clerk we could have had a picture taken today because we're all here, but some of you didn't report in to let her know you were here. So anyway, with that, we will, I see no special order of business. We will go to approval of minutes. Ms. Hall, I think you're in charge of that, or is it Mr. Kelly? Ms. Hall, go ahead.
I move we approve the minutes from September 1st, 2024, September 23, 2024, October 3rd, 2024, October 21st, 2024, February 3rd, 2025, April 5th, 2025, and April 30th, 2025. Do I need to state all the, what
No.
exactly?
No, but you
Okay.
do need to correct September 16th. You said first.
Okay, that's right, September 16th, regular assembly meeting, 2025.
Any objection? Seeing none, those minutes are approved. Next, we'll go to the manager for agenda changes requests.
Thank you, Mayor Weldon. I would like to pull two resolutions and place them under new business. There's been interest in public testimony on both of these resolutions. The first resolution is Resolution 4010B, a resolution supporting the continued public ownership of the Tongass National Forest and Minnehaha River Recreation Area. The second resolution is Resolution 4011, a resolution in support of continuity and ownership of Snettisham Hydroelectric Project assets.
Thank you, Madam Manager. Next, we go to public participation on non-agenda items. Since we have quite a few, we will limit you to 2 minutes this time. So we will start with Pete Karen. With a voice we all recognize, please state your name and area of town you live in for the record, and you have 2 minutes. That's right. You need to push the button on your microphone at the bottom and make it turn green.
Right, well, thank you.
Okay, you have 2 minutes.
Madam Mayor, members of the Assembly, my name is Pete Karen. I reside at 510 West 12th Street. That address is a couple of blocks from Cope Park, the management of which is the subject of my comments. I'm annoyed when I see a sign that goes up on the restrooms there each fall right after the last cruise ship leaves, saying it's closed for the season. I and many other local tax-paying residents use the park in all seasons, and we're there every day. At a minimum, place a portable facility there, as is the case at Sandy Beach. Some trash cans are locked during the off-season. One that was formerly at the entrance of the park was removed completely for whatever reason. I say the more trash cans, the better. The result of these closures is increased debris and human waste in the park. I hope the bridge to nowhere that has sat in the park since last fall will be erected this summer. It's my understanding The bridge was originally scheduled to be placed across Gold Creek 2 years ago. That was after a trail was blazed on the other side of the creek. On another topic, could someone please give the cross in Evergreen Cemetery a new coat of paint? The department oversees the cemetery, but when asked about that need, I'm told the top official responded that it is the responsibility of the Catholic Church. Please budget the department a couple gallons of paint and an hour of overtime and help out the Catholic Church. Thank you for this opportunity to comment and your service to the community.
Thank you, Mr. Karen. Perfect timing. Any questions for Mr. Karen? Seeing none, thank you for your comments tonight. We have taken note. Next, we have Scott Jenkins. Please state your name and area of town you live in for the record, and you have 2 minutes.
Scott Jenkins, 17070 Island View Drive. I was born and raised here in Juneau. My family, as well as other residents and business owners, are here tonight to express our concern over the homeless situation Juneau has. The encampments around the Glory Hole are growing every day, and the airport does what they can to clean up the mess, but it is out of hand. People camping is one thing, but should they be able to claim ground anywhere they wish as long as it's not private property? Blocking the sideways, leaving trash everywhere, shooting up drugs outside people's windows, needles in the ditches and in our vehicles, piles of human crap in and around the creek area on our property. Gone are the days of letting our kids walk the dog or ride their bikes to the skate park. My question to you is, how is this considered acceptable? The answer is it's not. A year ago, the Supreme Court made a ruling that the Ninth Circuit Court was wrong and camping would be deemed illegal. This was supposed to make a difference. Very little has changed. I spoke with an officer last week, and this is what he told me, and I quote, "Man, it's terrible. It has gotten so bad. It's so much worse than most people realize. The attorney's office dismissed any charges that come in right now unless they deem them a priority. We also don't have enough officers to respond to the majority of these types of calls on the street." Wow, this is one of our Juneau's finest trying to do their job. Because of the city not dealing with controlling this situation, our police officers are maxed out trying to manage an unenforceable problem. They need our city's support to enforce and clean this up. The city continues to raise our taxes, and yes, we have good roads, water, sewer, etc., but we are missing the boat on the homeless situation. Tonight, you are reviewing over 40 ordinances and actions, several costing many, many thousands of dollars, none of which address this situation. You may think you know the situation, but do we really know how bad it is? It is getting worse every day. The answer is yes, every day. In closing, I'm asking you all to look at this dire situation. It needs attention today. It can't go on. So please take action and allow our police to do the job they want to do. It is my intention that in a month's time, we will start with collecting garbage, junk cars, and the like, and we will deposit them in appropriate locations on CBJ property that will get our city's attention. This is legal in the city of Juneau, right? Yeah, I know it's ridiculous to
Mr.
think that.
Jenkins.
Nobody's property should be devalued by this disastrous
Mr.
mess.
Jenkins, your time is
Please
done.
clean it up. Thank you for your
Thank you.
time.
Any questions for Mr. Jenkins? We have a question for you. Mr. Smith?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Jenkins, thank you for
Yeah.
raising the issue of which I know at least I and others are aware, but I just wanted to check, are you a property owner in that area?
Yes.
Okay, very good, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for your testimony. I apologize for the pronunciation of this last name. Tiffany Koveman? Keveman. Please state your name correctly for the record, and you have 2 minutes.
Tiffany Keeneman. I am the Director of HR and Compliance for Alaska Glacier Seafoods, who also has Glacier Holdings, which is the 10 parcels right in front of the Glory Hall. I live at 3235 Breezy in the Valley. As the director, I'm also responsible for keeping all of our employees safe. I don't know, some of you guys do know, but the woman that was shot last year and Christmas came after us with a machete. I've got it on video. I've got pictures of it. We are attacked. We get attacked. We had last week, we had to do a police report because as soon as I drove in, they know our vehicles. As soon as I drove into our property, a guy came after us with a knife. So we had to call JPD. We have people out there loading vans, but that's not the worst of it. I mean, the safety part of it, somebody's going to get hurt. The worst part is we've got employees that live there. We've got employees that are in and out of those properties. We can't even keep them clean. We had to promise to help JPD. We let them on our property. They can have surveillance. They can have our video. But we've got drug deals going on Mallard Street every day, all day long. We know what vehicles. We can give you guys license plates. We know all of it. We know who's doing it. We know what they're doing. Every time we partnered for the last 3 years. The Glory Hall says it's uncontrollable. We partner and we do trespass orders only to find out last month that the city attorneys will not prosecute. That is unacceptable. We have done the work. We've done everything we've needed to do to no avail. So we are left in a very dangerous situation. Are you aware that almost every single homeless person that we deal with is weaponized? They have hatchets, they have machetes, they have knives, they have everything. Nobody is safe. We are literally perpendicular to Mr. Scott Jenkins' property, and it is insane. We have to do federal audits, which is what we partnered with JPD for. We've got bloody tampons thrown on the side of our building, not just the hazmat side of it with the needles. It's everywhere. You guys have to understand how bad it is, and if not, come down to our property. I will walk it with you. I will show you where they shoot up. I will show you where they sell. I will show you what they do every day. It is dangerous and somebody's going to get hurt and then they're going to come after you guys. Okay? I just want you guys to know it is way worse than you think.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony tonight. Next, we have Josh Anderson. Please state your name and area, town you live in for the record, and you have 2 minutes.
I stole Mr. Karen's hair so I could look taller. My name's Josh Anderson, 8544 North Douglas. I've served on the Parks and Rec Advisory Committee since 2014. I'm a local contractor. I own multiple properties around Juneau, and I'm also a downtown business owner. I'm also a good dad who picks up his kids and delivers the kids to the pools and the libraries every day. And I'm, seeing a big uptick in undesirables hanging around out there, and they're milling around outside doing strange things and panhandling. And I just think it's, and they have access to the locker rooms because they go in there and use the facilities. So hard to see, especially growing up here in Juneau. I'm also kind of appalled at, extremely appalled at all of the trash downtown in the valley. I see those guys rummaging through dumpsters and leaving stuff in the parking lot. They're laying all over the sidewalks downtown, leaving their food and their trash that they're rounding up in the entryways to businesses. Every morning I go out there and clean it up. I see other business owners cleaning it up. I see CBJ staff cleaning it up almost every day. I'd like to quantify the cost in dollars, time, and resources consumed by this problem. I see the CARES van showing up at least once a day. Sometimes see the fire trucks there twice a day. They'll pick up one of the crew off the ground there and haul them off, and 3 hours later that guy's back on the corner doing his thing. They're panhandling, and they're using the money to go and get their juice, and they're threatening people. They act nice, but when you tell them no, well, I got lots more.
Hang on. Any questions for Mr. Anderson? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Next, we have Marty McEwen. Please state your name and area of town you live in for the record. You have 2 minutes.
My name is Marty McEwen, and I live at 4411 Riverside Drive, and I'm here to talk about the problem that we've just been talking about with the homeless. I'm a property owner out in Vintage Business Park. I've got my Remax building there, and then I started the food truck park there. And then you have the couple of new buildings or newer buildings for Juneau. You got the Trillium, and then you've got the Riverview Senior Center, assisted senior living. So the Trillium and the senior housing that's all for seniors. It's an adult, or, like a senior housing is the Trillium Center where they live. There is a huge encampment on the river on private property and it doesn't belong to Trillium or the senior center, but there's a huge encampment of homeless people 50 yards behind where we are. Our elders in our community are paying big bucks to go and be taken care of in their later years. And we can't even get this encampment of homeless people. And not all homeless people are doing bad things, but a lot of these people are. There's meals and, human feces and all that, and garbage. We've had our food trucks broken into a couple weeks ago. I left my office on Friday, and there was a guy with a knife, must have been about that long, hacking on a tree on one of my neighbors' beautiful tree, and sitting there hacking on it. And he told me he could do whatever he wanted. It's scary stuff. The seniors in the senior housing they're not comfortable going outside and going for a walk along this beautiful, pristine business park that we all paid big bucks in property tax. And so anyway, I think the police should be empowered to handle the situations. And I don't know, is that my light? Am I gonna go? Oh, all right. I don't know. Anyway, it's a big problem, and I think the city needs to deal with it, and empowering the police would be one big step we could do. So, thank you for your time.
Wait, Mr. McEwen, Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. McEwen. Who is the property owner that there's the encampment on?
The Bowers.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and it's a piece of property that's down along the riverbank. It's tract D, and it's not a developable property, but they pay property tax on it.
Sure. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. See no further questions. Thank you for your testimony. Next, we have Brenda Heimbigner. Please state your name and area of town you live in for the record, and you have 2 minutes.
My name is Renda Heimbigner. I reside downtown Juneau. I have property out by the airport in the form of a residential, which I'm responsible for the tenant that resides there. And I would like to follow up on Mr. Jenkins' comments with regard to the characters of concern. Basically, these are vagrants, and they're homeless for a reason. And it is because of their illegal activities. They've been refused occupancy at the Glory Hole, and they're choosing to live on private property with whatever means makes them happy. Unfortunately, it doesn't make safety measures for long-term rentals, does not make safety measures for any one of us trying to walk from the street at Nugget Mall to the airport. That is now blocked and impossible. And God help you if you even think about walking there past after 7 o'clock at night when it's dark. And so my question to you is, we already have ordinances in place that address vagrancy, littering, all sorts of stuff that creates a safe environment for citizens of the Juneau proper. Those are being ignored from what we can tell, and that's not fair. Okay, we are in dire need of protection. And I just wanted to slip you a little rumor that's going around, and Anchorage has begun to ship theirs to California. And back in the day when us old guys were rocking and rolling, we would have what was called a red ticket, and we would get funds together and ship people that are conducting illegal activity and were endangering citizens, and we'd ship them to Seattle. So now I'll let you be, but those are some thoughts that I just wanted to add for your recognition that Juneau has become unsafe.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Heimdinger? See none, thank you for your testimony. Next, we have Jim Erickson. Please state your name and area of town you live in for the record. You have
Good evening. My name is Jim Erickson. My home address is 1676 Fritz Cove Road. Myself, along with my family, owns Alaska Glacier Seafoods here in Juneau. We own the old Evergreen Ford property, which I guess you could consider ground zero for this problem that we have blossoming in this town. I employ about 200 people in the summertime and about 60 people year round. It's the start of our 29th year in business in this town. It's gotten to the point of the homeless problem around our Ford property where I actually fear for the safety of my employees. In the summertime, we work long hours over there, preparing shipments for the airport and for other customers. So I have people that come and go at all odd hours of the day and night. It's gotten so bad the last few years. I really worry about the safety of my workers there. And I'm afraid it's just a matter of time, unless this problem is dealt with promptly and sternly, that something bad is going to happen to one of my workers or, potentially other people on the streets. I would invite all of you to come visit to see what we have going on over there. I know many of you are familiar with it. Probably many of you have been there already. This is not an easy problem. It's something that we all wish we didn't have to face and handle, but we need the city of Juneau's help to solve this. It is getting really, really bad, and we beg for your guys' help. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Erickson? Ms. Hall, sorry.
Yeah, thank you for your testimony, Mr. Erickson. During the months that the cold weather shelter was open in Thane, how was it during that time period?
It certainly seems less noticeable, but you can be on our property any month of the year and still feel in danger. We've done everything we're supposed to do. We've put signs up all around the perimeter of the property. It's private property. We own the property. None of that matters. I've been challenged by people on our property all the time. Our HR director, our employees have all been threatened and challenged at various times. The problem does seem less noticeable when that warming shelter is open, but at the same time, the problem in general seems to be growing no matter what month of the year it is. It's scary. It really is.
Thank you for your testimony. Next, we have Elizabeth Figgis. Please state your name and area of town you live in for the record, and you have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Good evening, members of the Assembly. My name is Elizabeth Figgis, and I live at 9350 View Drive. In 2023 and 2024, my home was flooded by the Suicide Basin glacier flooding, and I expect to be flooded again this year. After the 2024 flooding was categorized as a federal disaster, HESCO barriers were provided by the Army Corps of Engineers for flood fighting in the near term. The HESCO barrier Phase 1 and Phase 2 projects were defined by the city, and now Phase 1 has been completed. My neighborhood, my street, is the only flooded area in Juneau that was left out of the HESCO Phase 1 project. I'm really glad Phase 1 was completed early and under budget, and I definitely support protecting our schools, our libraries, and other private properties in the valley. But now that Phase 1 has turned into Phase 1A and 1B, I want to understand, have you as a group decided that certain neighborhoods are going to be flood sacrifice zones while others will be deemed worthy of protection? If so, that's never been made clear to the community, and we deserve to know if you intend to let our homes and our finances be destroyed. I'm here tonight to ask the Assembly to direct the City Manager's Office to immediately prioritize an assessment to determine the costs and engineering necessary for installing HESCO on View Drive. An assessment of the viability of Husco on View Drive is necessary for any steps that we might take as property owners on my street. We're going into our third year of consecutive flooding, and we need to know what the city's long-term plans are for View Drive. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Figgis? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony tonight. With that, I think we are done with non-agenda items, so we will move on to our agenda. We'll move to the consent agenda. Is there any public request for consent agenda changes other than ordinances for introduction? Seeing none, is there any assembly request for consent agenda changes? Mr. Bryson?
I don't have a request for change, but I have a conflict. I am not going to participate in Resolution 4006, resolution funding trail mixes. My daughter works for that organization. Everything else I'm good with, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Bryson. Anything further? Okay, I too have a conflict, so I will not be voting on item 35, a bid award to Dawson Construction, as my son works for Dawson Construction. So with that, we will go to Mr. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move the I move the consent agenda as amended with the recusals just noted, and ask for unanimous consent.
Any objection?
If I might, Madam Mayor, just to make sure that the amendment also includes the removal of the two resolutions previously removed by the manager.
Yes, it would. Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Unfortunately, I think everybody stepped outside because I was going to ask the attorney a question, but never mind, we'll ask it later. So we're going to public hearing, item 45. Madam Clerk. Page 11.
Sorry, thank you, Madam Mayor. Just trying to get that far down on the agenda. Ordinance 2025-05, version C, an ordinance setting forth the policy and procedures for the release of body-worn camera video footage in critical incidents.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Madam Manager.
In response to recent events in our community, the Assembly and the Juneau Police Department requested this ordinance to clarify the procedures for the release of body-worn camera footage in officer-involved use of force incidents that result in injury or death. This ordinance was considered by the Assembly Committee of the Whole at its March 17, 2025 and May 5, 2025 meetings. The Systemic Racism Review Committee reviewed the ordinance on April 29, 2025 and submitted comments to the Committee of the Whole meeting held on May 5, 2025. I recommend the Assembly take public testimony and adopt this ordinance.
Thank you, Madam Manager. Is there any member of the public that wishes to speak to this ordinance? Somebody has signed up. Seeing none, we will bring it to the Assembly. Mr. Bryson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move ordinance 2025-05, lowercase c, ordinance setting forth the policy and procedures for the release of body-worn camera video footage in critical incidents, and I ask for unanimous consent.
Thank you, Mr. Bryson. Ms. Hughes Candies.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I am objecting for the purpose of making an amendment. Since we have such a big packet, if anyone is looking for the ordinance, it's on page 229, or the section that I am focusing on. And I apologize, I was not able to work with the attorney and make a nice amendment to hand out to you all. So we will try to do this on the fly, and we'll see if we need to do an at ease or anything. So I would move on page 229, line 20, in section C, where it says, if delayed by the manager or chief of police, in no case shall a delay exceed the investigation. I would move to insert the language, or 10 days, whichever is shorter, period.
Does everybody understand that amendment? Is there any objection to that amendment? Mr. Smith?
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I thought when we dealt with this at the cow, this change was suggested by staff and maybe the chief, but maybe I'm wrong. I guess there was a reason for why we changed it from its original language, so I'm just.
Okay, I will look to the attorney because she is grabbing her mic.
Okay.
It is right.
Thank you for the question. So we did talk about this at the cow. The recommendation from staff initially was to not have any time frame on the chief and manager for these very specific safety concerns. The conversation that you all had was, while you appreciated our recommendation, you still wanted bookends there. So an amendment was made by the mayor. This adds additional bookends on that and is appropriate tonight.
I'll remove my objection for the question.
All right, any further objection? Seeing none, that amendment passes. Back to the main motion as amended. Any objection?
I remove my objection.
Thank you, Ms. Hughes Canny. Seeing no further objection, thank everybody for all their work, and thank you to the 3 assembly members that brought this forward. That motion passes. Sorry, big packet. Item 46, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is ordinance 2025-23, version B, an ordinance amending the City and Borough Title 69 Code relating to hosting platforms.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Madam Manager.
This ordinance provides updates to Title 69 regarding marketplace facilitators such as Turo, Airbnb, VRBO, or others who provide facilitation services to business owners within the City and Borough of Juneau. It requires marketplace facilitators collect and remit sales tax on behalf of local owners and to follow sales tax codes similar to other businesses. It exempts business owners from the collection and remission of sales tax when they operate exclusively through a marketplace facilitator and when the marketplace facilitator is fulfilling this obligation on their behalf. It additionally requires short-term rental business operators provide CBJ-issued registration permit numbers to hosting platforms prior to posting a rental on a hosting platform. It requires hosting platforms provide monthly reports of all Juneau-based short-term rentals and their permit numbers to staff to ensure compliance. This ordinance also increases the penalty for noncompliance with the registration permit program from $25 to $100 per violation. These code changes have all been reviewed and recommended by the Short-Term Rental Task Force. There is a staff recommended amendment to this ordinance that would clarify that issuing registration permits is not optional and that applicants may begin utilizing those registration permit numbers with hosting platforms immediately. CBJ maintains the ability to revoke permits and require hosting platforms remove rental advertisements if permits become invalid for any legal reason. The Short-Term Rental Task Force has also recommended this change. The Lands, Housing, and Economic Development Committee reviewed this ordinance at its May 5, 2025 meeting. I recommend the Assembly take public testimony and amend, then adopt this ordinance.
Thank you, Madam Manager. We have a couple people signed up. So first we'll have Michelle Norman. Please come to the mic. Please state your name and area of town you live in for the record, and you have 2 minutes.
Okay.
Or actually, because we don't have much testimony, you can have 3.
Okay, 3 would be better. I've been timing myself. I'm Michelle Norman. I live at 22795 Glacier Highway, and I'm a short-term rental owner, and I have comments on this. I'll try to be quick. The Short-Term Rental Task Force forwarded to the Assembly this ordinance on the April 7th meeting. The ordinance was reviewed at the May 5th Lands, Housing, and Economic Development Committee meeting, which also had no comment. I should back up. The Short-Term Rental Task Force has had no public forums for any public input for any of their meetings to date prior to presenting this ordinance to the city for adoption. Today is the first opportunity for public input, after which the Assembly is being asked to adopt the ordinance, leaving no real time for consideration of any comments. Nevertheless, here are my 2 cents. Overall, I support this ordinance, shifting responsibility from the short-term rental operators to the platform and requiring platforms to report data will allow review and accuracy of this reporting and can go a long way in ensuring compliance and increase to city revenue. This ordinance also includes an odd increase in the fine for noncompliance from $25 to $100 per day. I don't recall any discussion about the reasoning for this recommendation by the task force. In fact, at one meeting, a task force member asked the city representative what enforcement the current registration requirement has been done. As I suspected, the answer was none. There has been not a single fine or notice delivered to any non-compliant short-term rental operator. Why are we looking to change a regulation to increase a penalty when the efficacy of the current regulation is not known? This seems to be a recommendation made simply for the appearance of cracking down. Additionally, further changes proposed in this ordinance require platforms to include the registration number in the data that will be provided to the city monthly. The city can, upon receipt of the report, easily identify any listings missing this registration number or with erroneous numbers, and the ordinance requires platforms to remove the listing within 48 hours. This makes this fine pointless, as the city will have the tools to make enforcement a reality. Additionally, I understand it is the intention of this body that this ordinance apply to peer-to-peer car sharing platforms such as Turo. While the term marketplace facilitator has been defined in the ordinance, I would strongly recommend including the term peer-to-peer car share in the definition of marketplace facilitator. Sections of the ordinance clearly relate specifically to short-term rentals, and I would like to ensure the city sales tax requirement and this ordinance's provisions relating to collecting, reporting, and remitting sales tax by marketplace facilitators applies to peer-to-peer car share, not only short-term rental platforms. And it's important. I would have loved an opportunity to share these points with the short-term rental task force ahead of the introduction and for the adoption of this by the Assembly, but they have yet to hold any public forum meetings. Thank you for your time and consideration of my comments. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Norman? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony tonight. Next, we have Brenda Heimbigner. Please state your name and area of town you live in for the record, and you have 3 minutes.
Madam Mayor, would you tell me the subject, because I signed up for several?
The short-term rental.
Okay, got it. Okay, my name is Brenda Heimbigner. I live at 635 Alder Street. I own several properties, of which I long-term rent, short-term rent, and commercially rent. I wanted to object to the ordinance proposed, and that is that all housing is good. There is no bad housing. And the short terms, it's a fallacy that they are restricting long-term, because when you rent to someone, it's a personal choice. And so I've rented to drug dealers, I've rented to all sorts of people that I thought were just sweet and innocent and we could just make something great for them. And it ended up they were doing math. So my point is that when government overreach is trying to regulate personal choice, that's wrong. And it would be good to regulate safety for habitat. However, this is a personal choice. People are choosing who they're going to rent to, whether they're going to go long-term or short-term, and that's their decision. It's private property. It's a personal decision. So please don't discourage one thinking that you're going to encourage the other. Mr. Coleman presented at our committee that when short-term rentals declined, long-terms did not increase. So we have statistical data on that. And the next thing that I know you're looking at is how to improve the housing available, and that is to let the market do it. It will. It's all supply and demand. So stand back and let the market decide. And just know that short-term rentals are popular. We all use them when we travel. And just know that regulating them is restricting them. Also wanted to let you know that Haynes is looking at their ordinances and changing them to encourage short-term rentals. Wasilla went down the same road. What they did was they initiated early regulation ordinances for not understanding the market. And now they're going back and reviewing those and rescinding those. So the trend is now swinging back the other way to encourage them because they fill a gap. Their long-term housing or affordable housing availability in Juneau is not going to fill that gap. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from Ms. Heimlich? No. Seeing none. Any further public testimony on this item? Seeing none, we'll move it back to the assembly. Mr. Bryson, since you are chair, we will go to you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move ordinance 2025-23B, an ordinance amending the city and borough Title 69 code relating to hosting platforms. And I'm going to object for an amendment.
All right, go ahead.
On page 267, line 21. There's a line that says within 48 hours. I'm going to strike 48 hours and replace that with 5 days. That would be my amendment, Madam Mayor. And I'd ask for unanimous consent on the amendment.
Everybody clear? Ms. Hughes, Ms. Wall.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just maybe if the maker of the motion could speak to his motion.
Yes, my understanding is that this additional time came from discussions from the manager's office with Airbnb to make sure that there was adequate time for them to respond to it. And 5 days seems to be an appropriate length of time if a registration needed to be dealt with.
All right, any objection to this amendment? Mr. Smith?
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Just two things. One, I should disclose that in the recent past, I've operated my home as a short-term rental. My understanding from the attorney is that any of the regulations we're considering, or this one especially, is they're broad enough that I don't need to personally recuse, but I should say that, though I'm not operating or planning to operate mine as a short-term rental in the future. And then I have one other just question.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. To the maker of the amendment, did you say lines 21 and 25? Because I see the 48 hours located on both 21.
Yes, I meant that the 48 hours would be replaced in both locations with 5 days.
Very good, thank you. I remove my objection, thank you.
All right. Ms. Hughes Candy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will object just for purposes of a question. I am on the short-term rental task force. We did discuss some of staff's conversations with Airbnb and common mistakes or things that Airbnb had noticed in regulations in other cities. One of the things we talked about in the last meeting was the lack of communities not issuing numbers fast enough as a way, as sort of a backdoor way of stemming, I guess, short-term rentals. This 5 days from 48 hours, I'm wondering if Mr. Barr could just speak to that a little bit, or Manager Custer, but Mr. Barr was who spoke to it in the committee, which is why I asked.
Mr. Barr.
Thank you, Assemblymember Huskettis. This one came in late in the day on Friday in a conversation with Airbnb. So this particular amendment that Mr. Bryson has put before you was not one that I mentioned to the committee. The one that you reference is in the packet. Does that answer your question?
It does. I was like, I never heard this one, so thanks.
Madam Mayor, sorry if I may. I'll also just note, just for transparency's sake, that Airbnb certainly would prefer a longer period than 5 days. That is what they asked for. I'll just let you know that.
May I follow up?
Go ahead.
From staff's perspective, 5 days feels reasonable.
It does.
Okay, I remove my objection to this amendment.
Madam Mayor, in the spirit of disclosure, I want to disclose that I'm a Turo operator as well, but again, it's a small portion of that and it didn't impact my ability to serve on the SCR.
I'm looking at the attorney, she's nodding, okay. Any objection to the amendment? Seeing none, that amendment passes. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will move the staff recommended amendment that we find on page 269. Give people a chance to see that. And I believe this just has come through as part of the, deliberative process on the ordinance. I would probably defer questions on some of the pieces to staff, however, but I'll move that amendment.
Any questions on the amendment? Any objection to the amendment? Seeing none, that amendment number 2 is approved. So back to the main motion as amended. You want to say something, Ms. Hughes Candies, any objection?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Pardon me. I would just object for a very brief statement, which is to say, as a member of the short-term rental task force, I'm very eager to hear from the public, and I'm very cognizant of the fact that we haven't had public testimony yet. This is a sort of initiative that the Assembly was pursuing prior to the short-term rental task force, and is something that we've directed staff to work on previously, or something we were trying to get to, which is why I feel comfortable moving this forward without public testimony. With that, I'll remove my objection.
Thank you, Ms. Hughes Candies. This is a small piece of the short-term rental. All it's doing is saying the major marketplace facilitators are going to pay the tax if you're using them solely. So Mr. Bryson is chair of the task force. You've heard that, so please get a couple public meetings together.
Madam Mayor, I wanted to let you know that one of the next decision points that we had as the STR is determining when we're having public testimony. It's our next thing to do. It'll be coming.
Perfect. So thank you for that. So Mr. Smith.
Sorry, Mr. Kelly.
Oh, Mr. Kelly.
Thank you. And another thing that Ms. Norman brought up was that we're increasing fines, but that so far enforcement hasn't been very effective. I'm wondering if staff has an opinion, or perhaps members of the task force who sit on the Assembly, if they have an opinion that the changes we're making to code today would help to increase that enforcement.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Mr. Barr.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Kelly. We do believe that it will help us with compliance efforts significantly, especially the element of being able to compare the monthly report that we'll receive on our own issued registration permit numbers to Airbnb, being able to reconcile that against our internal database of registrations that short-term rental hosts have applied for. That, combined with the penalty provisions in the ordinance, should allow us to be much more efficient with that process.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll remove my objection.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. All right, so we have a motion with amendments. Any objection? Seeing none, so moved. Next, we have item 47. Madam Clerk. Page 12.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is ordinance 2025-24, an ordinance providing for the issuance and sale of general obligation bonds in one or more series to provide not to exceed $22,750,000 in net proceeds, and providing for the form and terms of the bonds and for unlimited tax levies to pay the bonds.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Madam Manager.
This ordinance authorizes the sale of $22.75 million of general obligation bonds as authorized by voters in the October 1, 2024 municipal election. Per the authorizing ballot measure, $12.75 million of bond funds will be used for the improvement of public safety communication infrastructure, including but not limited to replacing the outdated communication system with a system that will be Alaska Land Mobile Radio compliant. $10 million of bond funds will be used for the replacement of the wastewater clarifier building at the Juneau Douglas treatment plant that serves Thane, downtown, and Douglas. The bonds will be fully repaid within 10 years at an expected annual cost of approximately $12.75 million and $10 million for the public safety communication infrastructure and wastewater clarifier building bonds, respectively. Issuance of these bonds will not increase the debt service mill rate from its current level. I recommend the Assembly take public testimony and adopt this ordinance.
Thank you, Madam Manager. I don't have anybody signed up for this ordinance. Does anybody wish to testify to this ordinance? Seeing none, we'll go to the assembly. Ms. Wall.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move ordinance 2025-24, an ordinance providing for issuance and sale of the general obligation bonds in one or more series to provide not to exceed $22,750,000 in net proceeds, and I ask for unanimous consent.
Any objection? Seeing none, that motion passes, and thank you, Ms. Wall, for reading the Arbor Day proclamation, although it sounds like your voice isn't much better than mine. Moving on to item 48, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is ordinance 2024-01, version B, large letters A, F as in Frank. An ordinance appropriating $10,000 to the manager for the aircraft rescue firefighting truck capital improvement project. Funding provided by Airport Capital Reserve Funds.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Madam Manager.
This ordinance would appropriate $10,000 to the Aircraft Rescue Firefighting ARF truck, CIP. The truck is ready to go into production, but an additional $10,000 is required to cover a change order and future contingencies. If the Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, amends and increases the total grant amount upon the completion of the truck, these funds will be returned to the Airport Capital Reserve. The Airport Board of Directors approved this at the February 13, 2025 meeting. The Systemic Racism Review Committee reviewed this ordinance at its April 29, 2025 meeting. I recommend the Assembly take public testimony and adopt this ordinance.
Thank you, Madam Manager. We have no one signed up for this ordinance. Is there any member of the public that wishes to speak to this ordinance? Seeing none, we'll come back to the Assembly. Ms. Atkinson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move the Assembly adopt ordinance 2024-01, version B, large letters AF, and I ask for unanimous consent.
Any objection? Seeing none, that motion passes. Item 49. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is ordinance 2024-01, version B, large letters A, J. An ordinance appropriating $4 million to the manager for the Bartlett Regional Hospital Emergency Department Addition Capital Improvement Project, and de-appropriating $4 million from the manager for the Bartlett Regional Hospital Emergency Department Addition Capital Improvement Project. Funding provided by the United States Department of Health and Human Services.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Madam Manager.
$8,900,000 of hospital funds was appropriated via FY25 Ordinance 2024-01BI to the Bartlett Regional Hospital Emergency Department Additional Capital Improvement Project. Bartlett Regional Hospital has since received a $4 million grant from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services for this project. This ordinance would de-appropriate $4 million back to the hospital fund balance and appropriate the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services grant to the project. The Systemic Racism Review Committee reviewed this ordinance at its April 29, 2025 meeting. I recommend the Assembly take public testimony and adopt this ordinance.
Thank you, Madam Manager. We have nobody signed up for this ordinance. Does anybody in the audience wish to speak to this ordinance? Seeing none, we'll move it back to the Assembly. Mr. Steininger.
I move the Assembly adopt ordinance 2024-01BAJ and ask for unanimous consent.
Any objection? Seeing none, that motion passes. Item 50, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is ordinance 2024-01, version B, large letters AK. An ordinance appropriating $150,000 to the manager for Marie Drake Property Planning. Funding provided by general funds.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Madam Manager.
This ordinance would appropriate $150,000 for the Marie Drake Property Planning. During the Committee of the Whole meeting on February 24, 2025, the CBJ Assembly made a motion requesting staff to move forward with obtaining design and cost estimates for option 3 presented at the Public Works and Facilities Committee meeting on December 2, 2024, as well as options to abate and renovate the whole facility for child care use without any demolition. Option 3 would demolish 80% of the classroom wing and backfill with parking while retaining the boiler room / IT hub in the basement and retaining the gym and planetarium wing. This appropriation will fund a level of planning that provides for public process and more detailed, but not complete, design / cost estimating options for both option 3 and abate / renovate options. The Systemic Racism Review Committee reviewed this ordinance at its April 29, 2025 meeting. I recommend the Assembly take public testimony and adopt this ordinance.
Thank you, Madam Manager. Is there any member of the public that wishes to speak to this ordinance? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the Assembly. Ms. Hall.
I move the Assembly adopt ordinance 2024-01 BAK and ask for unanimous consent.
Is there any objection? Ms. Wall.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will object. I objected when we talked about this at the committee of the whole, but I'm hoping, and I think I was the only one, but I'm hoping that after going through the budget process and seeing what a uncertain time we are in, that maybe I can convince a few others to see things how I'm seeing things. You know, staff did a good job putting together some potential options for this building that we have to deal with at some point. All of them had big dollar signs behind them. We chose an option to explore. Now we're potentially putting $150,000 towards a community engagement on that option. I would advise that we take a moment, we see what happens over the next year, what state our budget in, what state the world is in. These options may look different to whoever is sitting up here in a year. I'd hate to spend money engaging the public and then have the world change pretty significantly. I don't see us getting to a solution anytime soon because of the amount of dollars it's going to take to get to that solution. So I'm asking for a no vote just to take a pause on this one.
Thank you, Ms. Wall. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Manager, do we know what the cost is to just keep that building in cold status or whatever? Do you have an annual sense of just what it just costs us?
Madam Manager.
We budget $450,000 in your FY26 budget for that facility. Of course, that includes keeping the planetarium wing and the gym open to the public.
I remove my objection, thanks.
Ms. Hughes-Gannies, are you waving your hand or are you asking?
I'm just waving my fingers at you. Wasn't strong enough. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will speak in objection to this. This one was a tough one for me. I appreciated everything staff brought forward. Staff, as naturally as they always are, 24/7, are trying to come up with solutions to our problems, and that includes getting a bunch of buildings that we didn't plan for. And I remember some of the lines of questioning from that cow were, what if we don't do this? What's the do nothing option? And I fully understand from Manager Custer's perspective, at some point, probably just keeping something in warm, cold, room temperature status, it may break, and then she will have to come back to us and say, now this building is a liability. But I am also sensitive with the fatness of this packet, just how many things that staff is constantly trying to solve. And so I think I feel comfortable at the moment just saying take a pause on this, because I think there are more than enough problems that we are throwing at them. And I don't love that we have a bunch of buildings that we ultimately need to figure out what to do, but I also feel like there is some wisdom in taking a breath to see what happens. So for that reason, I am also going to object. I have thought a bit better of my support at the Cal.
Thank you, Ms. Hughes-Gannies. Any other comments? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, we have a motion and objection. Please call the roll.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, for adoption of ordinance 2024-01B, large letter AK. Ms. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Steininger?
No.
Ms. Atkinson?
No.
Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Ms. Wall,
No.
Ms. Hughes Candies,
No.
Mr. Bryson,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Smith,
Yes.
and Mayor Weldon.
Yes.
5 yeas, 4 nays, motion passes.
Next, we have item 51. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is ordinance 2024-01, version B, large letters AL. An ordinance appropriating $200,000 to the manager for contingency federal staffing support related to tourism. Funding provided by state marine passenger fees.
Thank you, Madam Manager. Madam Clerk, Madam Manager.
Due to federal cuts, there's a great deal of uncertainty around the uninterrupted operation of federally managed visitor industry facilities, most importantly, the Mendenhall Glacier Visitor Center. The Mendenhall Glacier facility is profitable and is beloved public land. Forest Service staff currently doesn't have access to the funds they collect to support operations. The Visitor Center is currently operating on reduced capacity, staffed by employees transferred from other areas of the Forest Service, with support from Tlingit and Haida, Discovery Southeast, and tour operators. However, due to the rapidly developing and tumultuous nature of this situation, there may be a need to supplement organizations with existing operating agreements at the Mendenhall to maintain staffing continuity in the event of further reductions in force or other unforeseen circumstances, including to ensure these public lands remain in the public domain. These funds would be provided as and if needed, and at the discretion of the city manager. The Systemic Racism Review Committee reviewed this ordinance at its April 29, 2025 meeting. This ordinance was discussed by the Assembly Committee of the Whole at its May 5, 2025 meeting. I recommend the Assembly take public testimony and adopt this ordinance.
Thank you, Madam Manager. Is there any member of the public who wishes to speak to this ordinance? Please state your name and area of town you live in for the record. And
Good evening, my name is
3
Lori
minutes.
Craig. I am a retired Mendenhall Glacier Visitor Center park ranger. Thank you very much for putting this forward, and I hope it will pass. I can be very brief because I gave you some great pictures a couple of months ago showing you what happens when the bears come and the rangers aren't there. Last week, I saw my first beautiful bear out at the glacier while I was doing some volunteer work, and the bear behaved perfectly. It walked across the road, it went into the woods, it ate some grass, and that's exactly what we want. And we want to be sure that we have people who know how to deal with crowds of people when a bear shows up. It's not that easy. This was a perfect situation, and I want to be sure that we can support the people. The word tumultuous is very important, and just because this money comes from passenger fee, those are exactly the kinds of people that we need to take care of, along with the bears and our friends. Thank you. I urge you to pass this.
Any questions? I just want to thank you for your service, and I remember taking my children there and watching the Beaver movie.
Thank you.
Any further public comment? Seeing none, we will bring it back to the Assembly. Mr. Kelly.
I move that the Assembly adopt ordinance 2024-01, lowercase b, capital AL. And I object.
Do you wish to speak to your objection?
I think I'll start perhaps with a couple questions. So one thing that Ms. Craig did mention in her testimony was bear safety. With all the groups who are coming together to support the visitor center, do we have anyone who is focused on bear safety at this moment?
Madam Manager.
I'd like to invite Visitor Industry Director Pierce, who has far more intimate knowledge of the up-to-date, tumultuous and ever-evolving situation at the Mendenhall Visitor Center.
Ms. Pierce.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and through the Mayor, Assemblymember Kelly, the rangers that are currently working at the visitor center, whether they are moved from other areas in the Forest Service or are, people who have worked at the visitor center before, do have the adequate training for bear safety. I do not believe that staff, like for example, those working on behalf of the tour companies, have been trained by the Forest Service in that capacity. It is a fairly specialized job to be a ranger out there, as Ms. Craig can attest.
Mr. Kelly? You removing your objection or you're maintaining it?
I'll maintain it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further objection, Ms. Hughes Candies?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll object for purposes of a question first. I apologize, I was not able to be in attendance at that May 5th meeting where I'm sure you asked a lot of questions about how this would work specifically. But my question, I think, is for Madam Manager and perhaps for Ms. Pierce, if not. Initially, we already saw everybody fired, maybe no one's going to be there, and CBJ tour operator said, what are we going to do? And started talking. And I know CBJ was part of those conversations where everybody was, the tribe, everyone was brainstorming how we would do that. This is a federal property and a federal visitor center. CBJ does not have any, I mean, it is also within the borough. But I guess what I'm asking is the practicality for how this would work logistically. So CBJ would be saying, we have the funds if we need the funds to pay people, but what from a sort of herding cats / negotiating all these parties, how would that work?
Madam Manager.
Yeah, so you are correct. We don't have authority over the Mendenhall Visitor Center, which is why we would be working with Clequet and Haida and or Discovery Southeast, who both have co-stewardship agreements with the U.S. Forest Service.
Thank you.
Mr. Steininger.
Thank you, and I guess I'll object for the purpose of a question. Since the last time we discussed this, there's obviously a pre-evolving issue, and we've seen, since the last time we discussed this, we've seen a lot more visitors show up to town, a lot more traffic going out to the glacier. And I guess I'm wondering, have we seen specific instances or causes for concern as a result of this not having yet been funded? And kind of tangible examples of what it is that, what problem this would solve. Have we seen that kind of come to fruition? Have we seen more visitors at the glacier?
Ms. Director Pierce.
Thank you. Through the mayor, Assemblymember Steininger. The big issue that we've seen out there is when the visitor center is open and staffed from 10 to 5 every day, things are working. The Forest Service is managing their facility and it's operating. I drove out there today at about 3 p.m. to just kind of check in on how things were going, and there were rangers there in uniform doing a great job helping guests. The issues that I've heard about are during the off hours when the facility is open to the public, the visitor center is not open. There is a smaller staff presence on site with some tour operator staff and things like that. I think there have been a lot of visitor complaints. That's not something that we have a lot of control over, but we've only really had a week of busy operations, and that's the situation that we're trying to really closely monitor, is what do those off hours look like, and is there additional support that will be needed in those off hours? Again, recognizing that we don't control the facility, but we do have, I believe, a duty to our community to make our visitor industry work as smoothly as possible. And I think, an incident out there would damage the entire community, and that's kind of what we're trying to care through the partners that have the capacity to help.
All right. We have objection. I will actually speak for the ordinance, and everybody else has spoken. It has to do with the fact that we're uncertain of what's happening. As Director Pierce said, we seem to be okay when it's operating. We're still not sure about when the visitor center is not in operation, but we are too slow to react in the summertime if something does happen, and then we have to react. This is $200,000. It's not going to the federal government like some people think it is. It's going to the city manager to use at her discretion in case it's needed. The best case scenario would be that we wouldn't need it and none of the $200,000 will be spent. Worst case scenario, it will have to help Southeast Discovery and the tribe to staff to make sure our visitors are safe and our public area is kept clean. So a lot of this has to do ensure public lands remain in public domain, because what the federal government could do is make this privatized and have it go out to contract, and we are trying to avoid that. So this is totally a stopgap until we can figure out what's happening next year. So with that, we have a motion and we have objection, Madam Clerk.
Madam Mayor, may I speak to my objection? I only objected
sorry.
for purposes of a question. I would
Okay,
like to
go
speak to
ahead.
my objection. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I appreciate the indulgence. I am going to maintain my objection. I will just briefly speak to it and say I so appreciate the service of the folks who have worked in the public sector there. I understand that this will directly affect locals. If this is working poorly and that those funds are not there, that will directly impact our visitor industry. It will also impact visitors. But there are several actions that the federal government is taking on a sort of large scale right now that when I look at the size of our budget, I understand that we have these funds available, and I understand that this is not allowable use to them as we are deeming it. But as we start to think about those sections that we might need to backfill with local dollars to something that should be federally funded, I think we need to be super thoughtful in how we approach that and how we do it, and what are the metrics we are doing it and why we are doing that. We have already begun during this budget process. We have backfilled funds to the library, and the impact to the locals was great enough that I felt comfortable as an assembly member using local dollars to backfill what the federal government should be doing. I think these things will continue to happen, and I think outside of facilities that look just like this one, where it's a federal facility or there's a federal position that we are considering filling, we will also have federal responsibilities shunted onto our plate. And so when I think about those things, I'm thinking about the needs we may have in the future and the thoughtfulness we should have in how we approach this. And so for me, this doesn't meet the bar, although I appreciate the creativity and I appreciate the need. I have heard some people as describing a no vote on this as kind of cutting off our nose to spite our face. Yes, we might be right, but we are still going to suffer as a community. And there is really no good answer here. So I acknowledge those arguments as well. But for me, I will, I think it doesn't pass those tests, so I will be a no vote.
Thank you, Ms. Atkinson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm also objecting. I just will briefly, Ms. Uscandy has said a lot of my thought process, but just to summarize in short, there will be a lot of worthy causes, I think, that will come up short on funding, and this assembly will not be able to support them. And so I agree, we just have to be very thoughtful and know that we cannot possibly backfill all that is to come. And so even as important of a cause as this is, I just don't think that I can support it.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly.
Thank you. I think Ms. Atkinson and Ms. Uscandy spoke wonderfully to my thought process as well. I feel that passing something like this, especially without hard parameters, I think it possibly encourages the federal government in their model of undercutting their own federal staff. They actually have these funds, but the funds are frozen. So the funds are collected, the funds are frozen, and it's through their own actions that and through their own mismanagement on the higher levels. I don't want to speak poorly of the people on the ground, especially those who I know care very deeply about our forests and our parks and the Mendenhall Visitor Center. I know that for a lot of them that this is a passion. And I also, I don't, yeah, I think I'll leave it there and just say that I don't want to encourage this sort of behavior from the federal government. I see nothing in this ordinance that would discourage further actions like this, and I think this is a place where maybe we need to take a stand.
Thank you, Ms. Wall.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll support this motion with many of the concerns of my colleagues, but I feel like we're in wild, uncertain, scary times right now. I hope we do not need to spend this. I hope that our staff only spend it if we are seeing real safety concerns and garbage and bathrooms not being open, things that really reflect poorly and don't on our community and are putting people at risk. So I'm hoping we don't spend it, but I think we need to be flexible given the situation. And so I appreciate staff asking for that flexibility. Hope it doesn't come to that.
Thank you. Ms. Hall?
I also will speak in support of this motion. I feel like staff needs the flexibility with the uncertain landscape to address whatever may come up. And so I will be supporting this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll pause. We have a motion and objection, and just a gentle reminder, these are marine passenger fees. Madam Clerk, will you call roll?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, for the passage of ordinance 2024-01, version B, large letters AL. Mr. Kelly?
No.
Ms. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Steininger?
Yes.
Ms. Wall?
Yes.
Ms. Atkinson?
No.
Ms. Hughes Scandies?
No.
Mr. Bryson?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Smith?
Yes.
And Mayor Weldon?
Yes.
Motion passes 6 yeas, 3 nays.
All right, with that, I think we will take a 10-minute at ease. Does that sound good? So see everybody in 10 minutes. Item 52, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is ordinance 2024-01, version B, large letters A, M as in Mary. An ordinance appropriating $500,000 to the manager for the lead water service line inventory capital improvement project. Loan funding provided by the State of Alaska Department of Environmental Conservation, Alaska Drinking Water Fund, State Revolving Loan Fund.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Madam Manager.
This ordinance would appropriate $500,000 to the lead water service line inventory CIP. In fiscal year 23, CBJ hired a consultant to survey water lines in residences and businesses on the CBJ water system to adhere to the most recent EPA requirements regarding lead water service lines. This work has not yet been completed, as only approximately 18% of the customer lines have been reported. CBJ intends to complete the inventory and maintain the data for use by the community and has 10 years to complete this work. In FY24, Resolution 3056 authorized CBJ to apply for and enter into a loan agreement with the Alaska Department of Environmental Conservation. The Lead Service Line Loan Program offers a 58.3% loan forgiveness through the State Revolving Fund. The loan application was accepted, and this ordinance appropriates the loan funds. The Public Works and Facilities Committee was provided an update on the lead service line inventory project at the June 3, 2024 meeting. The Systemic Racism Review Committee reviewed this ordinance at its April 29, 2025 meeting. I recommend the Assembly take public testimony and adopt this ordinance.
Thank you, Madam Manager. Is there any member of the public that wishes to speak to this ordinance? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the Assembly. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move ordinance 2024-01BAM and ask for unanimous consent.
I'm going to object for purposes of the question. Madam Manager, I believe this is the federal government that's telling us we have to do this, right? We didn't choose to do this on our own, is that correct?
You are correct, Madam Manager. This is a requirement of the federal government.
All right, thank you for that. With that, I remove my objection. Seeing no objection, that motion passes. Item 53, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is ordinance 2024-01, version B, large letters A, N. An ordinance appropriating $1,115,654 to the manager for the Taku Harbor Improvements Capital Improvement Project. Grant funding provided by the Alaska Department of Fish and Game.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Madam Manager.
This ordinance would appropriate $1,115,654 of Alaska Department of Fish and Game grant to the Taku Harbor Improvement CIP. This funding will improve public recreational boating and sport fishing access facilities by replacing the degraded Taku Harbor shore access boarding float system with new aluminum gangway and catwalk structures. The 25% local match requirement of $371,885 will be provided by previously appropriated funds in the Taku Harbor Improvement CIP. The Docks and Harbors Board reviewed this request at the April 24, 2025 meeting. The Systemic Racism Review Committee reviewed this ordinance at its April 29, 2025 meeting. I recommend the Assembly take public testimony and adopt this ordinance.
Thank you, Madam Manager. Is there any member of the public that wishes to speak to this ordinance? Seeing none, we'll bring it to the Assembly. Since we're going to hear from you in a minute, Mr. Bryson, we'll go to Ms. Hughes-Gandes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the Assembly adopt ordinance 2024-01, lower b, large letter AN, and I ask for unanimous consent.
Any objection? Seeing none, that motion passes. Item 54, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is ordinance 2025-01, version B, large letter A. An ordinance appropriating $12,750,000 to the manager for the Public Safety Communication Infrastructure Capital Improvement Project. Funding provided by general obligation bond proceeds.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Madam Manager.
This ordinance would appropriate $12.75 million of general obligation bond proceeds for the Public Safety Communication Infrastructure Capital Improvement Project. This project would provide for the acquisition and installation of a replacement radio communication system. This is an FY26 appropriation to align with the timing of bond issuance. This appropriation of project funding is consistent with the intent of the $12.75 million general obligation bond package approved by voters in the October 1, 2024 municipal election. I recommend the Assembly take public testimony and adopt this ordinance.
Thank you, Madam Manager. Is there any member of the public that wishes to speak to this ordinance? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the Assembly. Ms. Wall.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move the Assembly approve ordinance 2025-01BA and ask for unanimous consent.
Any objection? Seeing none, that motion passes. That moves on to unfinished business. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is ordinance 2025-02, version B, an ordinance appropriating funds from the Treasury for fiscal year 26 school district operations.
Thank you, Madam Manager. Excuse me, Madam Clerk, Madam Manager.
This ordinance will appropriate to the school district an FY26 operating budget of $94,977,500. This is an overall increase in the budget of $9,580,100 from the FY25 amended budget. The FY26 school budget is supported with a combination of funding sources, including CBJ local funding of $37,119,700 and state and federal funding of $49,011,800. The local funding consists of $35,004,700 for general operations and $2,115,000 for programs and activities not subject to the state funding cap. State statute requires the Assembly to determine the total amount of local educational funding support to be provided and provide notification to the support to the school board within 30 days of school district's budget submission. The district's budget was submitted April 1, 2025. During the April 30, 2025 special assembly meeting, the Assembly approved the local funding portion of $35,004,700 for school district general operations. During the May 7, 2025 Assembly Finance Committee meeting, the Assembly approved $2,115,000 for program and activities not subject to the state funding cap. By charter, the Assembly is required to appropriate the school district's budget no later than May 31, 2025. I recommend the Assembly take public testimony and adopt this ordinance.
Thank you, Madam Manager, and we do have Superintendent Hauser if any questions. Any member of the public wish to speak to this ordinance? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the Assembly. Ms. Atkinson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move the Assembly adopt ordinance 2025-02, version B, and I ask for unanimous consent.
Any objection? Seeing none, that motion passes. Next, we go to new business, and we have two new items on that. So the first one will be I think item 33, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is Resolution 4010, Version B, a resolution supporting the continued public ownership of the Tongass National Forest and Mendenhall Glacier Recreation Area.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Madam Manager.
This resolution affirms CBJ's commitment to keeping public lands, including the Mendenhall Glacier Recreation Area, under public ownership. The Mendenhall Glacier is a popular public recreation area and a major economic driver for our community. Many small businesses are dependent on the facility for their livelihoods, and the U.S. Forest Service and Tlingit and Haida have partnered on a successful co-stewardship agreement for management of this world-renowned facility. This resolution was discussed and amended by the Assembly Committee of the Whole at its May 5, 2025 meeting. I recommend the Assembly take public testimony and adopt this resolution.
Thank you, Thank you, Madam Manager. Is there any member of the public that wishes to speak to this ordinance? Go ahead and come up, and please state your name and area of the town you live in for the record, and you have 3 minutes. And if you push the bottom red button, it will turn green, and then you can talk.
Thank you for having me. My name is Kelby Randall. I am a homeowner along Glacier Highway in Lemon Creek. I would like to thank the Assembly for drafting this resolution, and I speak in favor of it. For the last 4 years, I've been a glacier guide on and around the Mendenhall, Aquatuxet, while pursuing an undergrad degree at University of Alaska Southeast. This summer, I will be spending 2 months on the ice field as part of the Juneau Icefield Research Project, so I would be honored and impressed for other people that have spent the thousands of hours on and around this natural wonder. It's unique in the world not because it's a glacier, but because it is so accessible. When considering the possibility of a non-public glacier recreation area, I urge the Assembly to look north to the Matanuska Glacier. Bill Stevenson, a private individual, owns the land to access the Matanuska, and one must pay admission and hire a guide at Glacier Park to even get to this glacier. It's surrounded with staging areas, construction equipment, and derelict vehicles used in years past to maintain the private property. In contrast, I am told daily on the tours I give that Aquatuxet and its surrounding trails are the most pristine landscape that most people have ever seen. I would tend to agree, and though I guide for a living, I could not possibly support mandatory guiding services or a privatized recreation area. Anyone can go up the West Glacier Trail and get on the Mendenhall tomorrow, free for public access. So private stewardship would put this area at the same risk that has been seen at the Matanuska. It would paywall this uniquely accessible glacier, and hearing that it was even an option shocked and appalled me. When considering a non-public glacier recreation area, I feel the weight of the mural behind you. It is more than just a landscape, it is a defining feature of the land and the people who reside on and around it. For these reasons, I support this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Anybody else want to speak to this? Seeing none, we'll bring to the Assembly. Ms. Hall, I think, no, wait, sorry, Mr. Steininger, sorry, second round.
I move the Assembly adopt Resolution 4010B and ask for unanimous consent.
Ms. Wall.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I object just for a resolution, amendment, which you have in your red folder. Do I need to read all of my changes?
I don't think that's necessary. Everybody can read it. We'll take a minute for everybody to read it. Save Ms. Wall's voice. Mr. Smith just volunteered to read it. Go ahead, Mr. Smith.
Just in case people need it to be read aloud. Well, I actually don't know if I want to support, I don't know if I'm going to move it. So I'm just kidding. I will read it aloud. Changing on line 33 from tribal co-management to tribal co-stewardship. Lines 51 to 56 are struck, and now the new words would read, the City and Borough of Juneau supports the management of the Mendenhall Glacier Recreation Area by the United States Forest Service and their co-stewardship agreement with the Central Council of Tlingit and Haida Indian Tribes of Alaska for this area. Section, and then changing line 60, striking the word tribe and saying Central Council of Tlingit and Haida Indian Tribes of Alaska.
Thank you for that, Mr. Smith. Ms. Wall, you want to speak to it?
Yeah, thank you. we made some changes that I liked when we discussed this at the cow. Why I wanted to make these additional changes is because I know tribes across the Tongass have been working for many years on increasing their management authorities on the Tongass. The Mendenhall Glacier Recreation Area is one of those successes in this co-stewardship agreement that they have, but there are certainly potential opportunities in the future for increasing tribal management of public lands. I felt like our language was limiting in that it was really just speaking to the Forest Service and this being federally managed. So wanted to make sure it was inclusive of recognizing a future where we have tribal authority on the Tongass.
Thank you, Ms. Wall. So we have an amendment. Any objection to the amendment? Mr. Smith?
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I'd make an amendment to the amendment, and on line 56, lowercase the a of area, unless there's a legal reason that that would be capitalized. Right.
Mr. Smith, or Madam Attorney, do you want to talk to that since it's referenced as a large or capital A elsewhere in the resolution?
Hang on one second. Yeah. Madam Mayor, so two things on this one. First, it does match the rest of the resolution, capital A area. Two, I don't know that it needs an amendment. The attorney is empowered to make grammatical and other corrections if needed, so I am happy to look at it and double check my grammar book.
I was just thinking it was capitalized earlier because it was a proper pronoun with the Mendenhall Glacier National Recreational Area. So I can remove my amendment. And then I have a question.
Go ahead, Mr. Smith.
Thank you. So to the maker of the amendment, we're striking the words should remain a federally managed resource to ensure these public lands are accessible to all. Are we not conveying that sentiment, or is there a reason you don't wish to convey that piece by the change you're making?
I think I worked on this language, and with Klinka and Haida, and my intent was to match the intent of what I believe Senator Murkowski asked for, and that we discussed. And these are this is the language we chose. I'm not splitting hairs about removing these public lands are accessible to all. I'm really just trying to say we support the Forest Service in their management, and we also support the tribes in their management.
I have a follow-up.
Mr. Smith.
Knowing that this was sorry, I guess, did we check with the federal delegation or staff or anybody there to see if this is still going to achieve their desire? Okay. I'll remove my objection.
Thank you. All right, back to the amendment. Do we have objection? Ms. Hughes Candies?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can I have a brief Eddie's?
Certainly, 2 minutes. Session, Ms. Hughes Candies, do you have an amendment? Oh, wait, we have to stay with this amendment?
Yes.
Okay,
I do not have an objection to the amendment.
okay. Any objection to Ms. Wall's amendment? Seeing none, that amendment passes. Ms. Hughes Candies,
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I am going to move to make an amendment to line 56 of section 2. And it is to strike the period after the now lowercase a area and insert the words, and insert a comma and insert the words, and supports these public lands remaining accessible to all, period.
any objection to that amendment? Ms. Wall?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've been trying to avoid this topic, but I have to object. I appreciate the sentiment of everyone who has reached out asking for strong language here, and I know we all want to enjoy this amazing place that we have. I get uncomfortable with language around keeping public lands in public hands because that term has been used for decades to weaponize to keep Native people from their land here on the Tongass that was promised to them. So I don't like the language. I know that's not the intent. It's not the intent of anyone who votes for it tonight, but I do think words matter, and I don't like those words. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Hughes Candies?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And thank you to Ms. Wall for those comments. I appreciate that, and I appreciate your previous professional experience and expertise in seeing those words get weaponized. My intention in inserting this is to make sure that this resolution, it was the majority of the body previously who voted to move passenger fees for this area. So I'm hoping with this resolution, with this insertion, just to make sure that this resolution similarly meets the sort of request for Juneau to make a statement in this. I do also want to just express my appreciation that Ms. Wall took the time to wordsmith this a little bit more, and I absolutely would not want these words to be taken that way, and I support the tribe obviously having access and ownership and authority over their unceded land. So I'm going to ask for a yes vote to insert this to make sure that Juneau makes its sentiment known during this crazy federal time. But I appreciate the objection.
All right, Madam Clerk, we have an amendment with an objection. Please call the roll.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is for amendment number 2 to resolution 4010B. Ms. Hughes Candies?
Yes.
Ms. Wall?
No.
Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Ms. Atkinson?
Yes.
Mr. Steininger?
Yes.
Ms. Hall?
No.
Mr. Bryson?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
And Mayor Weldon?
Yes.
Motion carries 7-2.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. So now we have a motion as amended. Any objection to that? Seeing none, that motion passes. Next, we have item 34. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is resolution 4011, a resolution in support of continuity in ownership of Snettisham Hydroelectric Project assets.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Madam Manager.
This resolution was requested by Mayor Weldon on behalf of Alaska Electric Light and Power to ensure uninterrupted, safe, affordable, and reliable power generation from Snettisham Hydropower for the ratepayers in the city and borough of Juneau. Snettisham supplies 2/3 of the hydropower electricity for the city and borough of Juneau, and it is imperative the owner of Snettisham, currently Alaska Industrial Development and Export Authority, hold title to all assets directly connected to the Snettisham transmission line to guarantee continuity of service. I recommend the Assembly take public testimony and adopt this resolution.
Thank you, Madam Manager. We have several members of the public that wish to speak to this resolution. So we'll hold it to 2 minutes. Number one, Alec Mesdag. Please come up, state your name and area of town you live in for the record, and you have 2 minutes. And if you push the button at the bottom to make it green, you'll turn your mic on.
I'm Alec Mesdag. I'm the president and CEO of AEL&P. I live up the road on Beardsley Way. So the importance of Snettisham to Juneau is pretty difficult to overstate. Snettisham supplies 2/3 of the electricity that Juneau consumes each year, and it is our lowest cost source of electricity. So Snettisham is the epitome of essential infrastructure. Since 1998, Snettisham has been owned by ADA, and AEL&P has operated, maintained, and performed all necessary capital improvements. AEL&P, and by extension, all electric customers in Juneau, are responsible for all costs associated with Snettisham, whether or not the project is able to deliver power to Juneau. The community understands the magnitude of harm that occurs when access to Snettisham is interrupted. Everyone who lived through the 2008 avalanche remembers the impact to rates while repairs were done. The event made it abundantly clear that to everyone affected that the security and reliability of the Snettisham transmission line is vital to Juneau's economy. On June 11th, the Regulatory Commission of Alaska will rule on whether a party other than ADA may own a switchyard that will bisect the Snettisham transmission line. While the specific question before the Commission relates to Juneau Hydropower's request to interconnect with the Snettisham line, the Commission's answer will create precedent for determining who can own assets that connect with the Snettisham line at any time in the future. Only AEL&P has an obligation to serve Juneau, and AEL&P meets that obligation primarily from the Snettisham project. Through agreements with ADA, AEL&P has obligations to ensure adequate planning and funding to maintain the project. AEL&P asks for the Assembly to support this resolution to assert what is intuitive to us all, that it is an unacceptable risk to allow an entity that has never built, owned, operated, or maintained a generating facility or transmission system to own equipment that can interrupt the delivery of power from Snettisham to Juneau. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Mesdag? Mr. Smith and then Mr. Kelly.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Mesnick, thank you for being here. Just thinking about Lake Dorothy and that AEL&P, anyway, owns. I guess my question is, what assets at Lake Dorothy that can, if they do connect to the Snettisham line, are owned by AEL&P and which are owned or held title by ADA?
So thank you for the question. So the Lake Dorothy project was built and constructed by AEL&P. The plant and the transmission line that travels from the plant to the Snettisham line is owned by AEL&P, but the actual devices that make the interconnection with the Snettisham line are titled to ADA. So all of the equipment that actually provides the electrical protection for the interconnection with the Snettisham transmission line, that equipment is owned by ADA. So they were funded by AEL&P as part of a project expense, and then the ownership was titled to ADA.
Mr. Kelly.
Thank you. Actually, I think I'll hold my question for now. Thank you.
Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I guess with that, Mr. Mesdag, would you say that in the Lake Dorothy case, ADA holds title to all the assets directly does ADA still hold title to all assets directly connected with the Snettisham transmission line? Or are there other things at Lake Dorothy that are directly connected that are not held by Ada, where the title of which is not held by Ada?
Mr. Bestic.
So there is nothing that is directly connected to the Snettisham line that is owned by AEL&P. So what we do and the way that we've interpreted the section 4B that is quoted in the resolution is that all anything that is acquired or constructed in connection with the project is titled to Ada. So that would include the physical connections to the transmission line. That includes everything down to when we purchase a vehicle for use at the project, that is titled to Ada. So even the vehicles that are used at the project, equipment, snow removal equipment, all of that is titled to Ada. We do not, we have an interconnection with the Snettisham the Snettisham project includes the hydroelectric generating assets at Snettisham, the various support facilities there, the transmission line from Snettisham to Juneau, to the east terminal, right? So where the overhead transmission meets the submarine cables to the west terminal, which is where the submarine cables then transition back to overhead, and then the transmission line all the way to Thane, the Thane substation and Thane operations center. And then at the Thane substation, there is a transition from 138,000 volts to 69,000 volts. And at that 69,000 volt system, that's where AEL&P's system begins. So right now we have the Snettisham project is all of those assets from Thane all the way out to the project there. And everything that is directly connected to the transmission line is owned by Ada.
Ms. Wall.
Thank you, Mr. Mesdag, for being here. We, get a lot of requests for resolutions, and we try to be disciplined about, spending time on things that we really have control over and, really make a difference when we take action as an assembly where things are very innocuous and we can quickly pass. Can you tell me why you think it's important for us as the assembly to take action and what our action will impact?
Mr. Messer.
I really, like I said in my statements, I don't think that it is very difficult to overstate the importance of Snettisham to Juneau. It is very important to Juneau. And the question that is before the commission right now is one where, I wouldn't have brought this to the assembly had I not been completely taken off guard, and Ada argued that this switchyard should be owned by Juneau Hydropower. And I think that is really just a statement about the lack of expertise at Ada to make this sort of decision. They do not have anybody at Ada who has experience operating in electric utility operations. We used to have a project manager, a guy named Brian Carey, who's an AEA employee. He was the Snettisham project manager since the acquisition until very recently, when he was replaced by somebody who does not have direct experience operating, maintaining, or a background in utilities or hydropower at all. So even the outside counsel that Ada hired to participate in this docket is not actually does not normally work in front of the Regulatory Commission of Alaska and is not familiar with the industry. So Ada's arguments, including things like suggesting that they don't want to own it because it might expose them to environmental liability, don't hold a lot of weight when the O&M agreement that they have in place with AEL&P shield them from environmental liability very explicitly in the agreement. So it appears to me that Ada's attorney did not carefully even read that agreement before making such an argument. So it is absolutely an industry norm that interconnection equipment is owned by the serving utility because it is the serving utility that has a responsibility to maintain the reliability of the system. Under the agreements that AEL&P has with Ada, we have requirements for how we perform our capital planning how we collect through rates in Juneau money that goes into a renewal and replacement fund, which is the value or the contribution to that fund is based on a capital plan that is developed with an independent consultant and that goes out 40 years. And then we do a net present value for the capital needs for a shorter period of time. And that goes into the R&R fund. And then when ALMP performs that capital improvement, we get reimbursed from the fund. So there is a tremendous amount of protection for Juneau in the agreements that manage that line, that kind of oversee how that line is managed. No other entity has those obligations. And it would be, I just think this is one of those times. I don't come here often to ask things of the Assembly because I know that you have, your plate is full a lot. And there isn't anything that I have felt that is more important for me to ask of you than this. So it is important that we state, I would greatly appreciate your vote in support of this resolution because this is absolutely critical infrastructure for Juneau. And it is a bad idea to allow a party who does not have the obligations that ALMP has to be in charge of the asset, to own an asset that can interrupt the flow of power from Snettisham to Juneau.
Mr. Kelly.
Thank you. I think I wanted to follow up on something you just said in your your last comment. You spoke to expertise and experience. The Regulatory Commission of Alaska, from the homework I've been able to do, this matter has been before them since, I believe, January or February, and they've had quite a few hearings on them. I guess it seems to me that they would have the expertise to decide, big decisions like this. Why, especially since there is a public advocate assigned by the Attorney General that also speaks to the public's behalf. Why is it necessary that, and how are we more qualified than the RCA to weigh in on this decision?
Mr. Mezig.
So I think that's a great question. So even though the RCA and the commissioners have relevant expertise to make a decision in this matter, and they've heard a lot of evidence, as you mentioned, in the hearings related to it. We still have a public comment period at the beginning of every docket to inform the RCA as they go through in making their decision. Now, in this case, the public comment period and the public notice for this docket did not notify the public that the RCA intended to adjudicate interconnection issues between JHI and ALMP. That is not something that any of the parties discovered until the pre-hearing conference on December 18th, after the public comment period had closed. So even though the RCA will adjudicate this matter, and it may be the case that they rule as I believe that they should, or as that ALMP has argued that they should, they have a public comment period in order to hear from people, interested parties who might be able to provide information that is useful to them, or at least state what they believe to be true about the matter. And so the CBJ does have a role in informing the RCA, just as it has participated in other RCA dockets in the past. It's a matter of making your voice heard, and on an issue that I believe is of the utmost importance for Juneau's energy security.
Anything further? All right, thank you for your testimony tonight. Next, we have Chris Hart. Please state your name and area of town you live in for the record, and you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Chris Hart, and I reside on Cassian. I am a shareholder in Juneau Hydro, and have been involved in this project for probably 12 years, or a little longer. I have sat through the RCA Commission hearings, and listen to the discussions on this particular issue. And that is the docket U 24036. And I would ask anyone who would like to go check on that information that there is a lot of documents there. There were a lot of engineers. There were a lot of consultants. And this was discussed. We are not saying that we would own the entire Snettisham line. The Snettisham line will run right beside our switchyard. It will be capable of having a bypass. Those pieces will all be owned by Ada, by the agreement. We don't know how the RCA will rule, but that was how it was proposed. Sitting next to it is a switchyard. The switchyard is like the plug coming into this thing for Sweetheart Lake to attach to this. It's a multi-million-dollar switchyard, and it needs to be monetized, so the loan needs to carry a part of it. It can be operated by very capable consultants if need be. It could be operated by AL&P if they were wanting to. We're open to any of those discussions. Very strong, redundant system, built to be very resilient. And so our point of view is that it is very important that the public owns the facility, and I strongly support that.
All right, thank you. Any questions for Mr. Hart? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Mr. Bryson.
Thank you for coming and testifying tonight. Could you maybe speak to the consequences of, let's say that the RCA rules with AEL&P that they have to maintain the line and they don't rule in favor of Juneau Hydro? What would the consequences to that project be, sir?
If the RCA were to rule that a large portion of our attachment may not be able to be capitalized, it may make the project not cost effective. Okay. But we're open to whatever the RCA rules, and we're kind of hoping we can wait for that to happen on June 11th. We believe they're studied this very well.
Ms. Hughes-Ganis.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you for being here tonight to testify. I'm going to ask you a question. I'm sure you've looked at the resolution. There are whereases in here that reference prior agreements. So the Snettisham PSA, which has language in it saying it's with Ada unless at some point it moves to Snettisham Electric Company, which is tied to AEL&P. And in the past, CBJ entered into an agreement which grants a city right of first refusal on if AEL&P wanted to sell it to an entity that was not tied to AEL&P. I'm curious with that history in these proceedings, knowing that this is sort of the baseline where you're starting with it lives with Ada or it lives with it, and if not, it'll move to AEL&P, and if AEL&P wants to do something, it'll move to CBJ. So you spoke to redundancies and you talked about owning some piece of it, if not the whole thing. So I'm just curious if you could talk a little bit about, knowing that this is this base history, what you think has changed to change that, I guess.
I don't think the Snettisham agreement ever anticipated somebody else connecting to it. It is silent on those terms. So when we come to connect to it, the agreement was mainly about maintaining the Snettisham connections. So this is a third party connecting to a utility line. And that agreement doesn't really speak to it. So that's been part of the problem.
Thank you.
Any further questions for Mr. Hart? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony tonight.
Thank you.
Next, we have John Harris. Okay, then we have BJ Loper. Seeing none, then we have Keith Comstock. Please state your name and area of town you live in for the record, and they have the mics left on, so you should be good there.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and Assembly. My name is Keith Comstock. I live in Elk Bay.
Go ahead, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Hi, interesting that we're here this evening. Just got back with my mom from a successful surgery, so happy to be home. I was told the weather was like this the whole time I was gone, so keep it up, guys. So I want to, just my comments on this are, this is a matter for the RCA. The RCA will rule. My assumption is that Mr. Mesdek would not be here asking for this if he didn't think that the RCA was going to make a ruling that would allow Juneau Hydropower to go into production and actually to construct next year and to operate. And so, I believe that this is an attempt to open a new line of attack, which is consistent with Mr. Mesdek's attitude for a long time, and that's all I got.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Comstock? Mr. Smith?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Comstock, hearing what Mr. Mesdek described about the directly connected piece, there's one resolve in this resolution, the rest is this whereas. Does the directly connected piece give you concern? It
does. I believe if that were removed, we would have no concerns. We certainly don't oppose Ada owning the line that they own. Ada and AEA have been supportive of Juneau Hydropower's position. I do take offense at the attacks on Ada and AEA. I do believe there are qualified people there. And so, we're here. We're on the verge of going to construction and on the verge of being able to make a positive impact on the community in a lot of areas. We can talk about this anytime you want. Happy to come and present anytime. We're very close. And it is what it is.
Any further questions for Mr. Comstock? Thank you for your testimony tonight.
Thank you.
Next, we have Milani Shivens. Please state your name and area of town you live in for the record, and you have 2 minutes.
Hi, I'm Milani Shivens. I live at 610 West 11th Street. When I first started paying attention to the Juneau economy more than 30 years ago, one of the first things that became very apparent to me was that the AEL&P operated hydropower is one of Juneau's most valuable assets, if not our most valuable one, and it has an enormous impact on our community each and every day. Both due to the relatively low cost of electricity that our community households and businesses enjoy, as well as the incredible stewardship and care that AEL&P has taken of our hydroelectric assets. AEL&P maintains a robust team of highly skilled professionals supported by backup infrastructure, ensuring rapid restoration of power in the event of disruption. Their longstanding commitment to reliability has served Juneau successfully for more than 130 years. Snettisham supplies about 2/3 of Juneau's electricity and is at our lowest cost levels. Currently, RCA is considering allowing an entity that has never produced or sold a single kilowatt of electricity and lacks even a full-time lineman to own equipment capable of interrupting the flow of energy on our Snettisham line. The potential consequences of such a decision would be severely detrimental to our community and our economy. Any interruption in the connectivity between Juneau and Snettisham would directly impose a cost of approximately $300,000 a day on our community, excluding the expenses required to address the interruption itself. Who would bear these costs? Would it be CBJ, Juneau ratepayers, AEL&P? Why would we take this risk? It is imperative that the ownership and control of this infrastructure remain with Ada. Transferring this critical responsibility to an unproven entity with no track record in operating, maintaining, or troubleshooting in Alaska's unforgiving climate in a remote area would be deeply irresponsible. CBJ must not only pass this resolution, but also follow up to protect our Snettisham line. Thank you.
Perfect timing, Ms. Shivens. Any questions for Ms. Shivens? Mr. Bryce?
Ms. Shivens, nice to see you. Hearing you speak so eloquently about this, it's very easy to completely see the side and the perspective. I think my question to you is, with that level of understanding, wouldn't we be best served to let the RCA make the ruling before Juneau decided? Because we don't claim to be experts, and that's part of a little bit what people are saying. I would hope the people that are making it, the Regulatory Commission of Alaska ruling, would have more experience in it. Why wouldn't we just let them make the ruling? What would?
I think it would be so this asset is so important to our economy. I mean, you know, I remember like 30 years ago, like the study I want to do is the economic impact of like hydropower in Juneau. It is incredible. We pay the same rates, not adjusted for inflation, that we paid 100 years ago. It is incredible. And that we're going to just let somebody else make that decision for us. This is our asset. There is nothing more important to our economy than this. I can't stress that highly enough. And we cannot like take the back seat on this decision. Like, I have never come to testify on anything personal, like on something that wasn't a project, one of my work projects. So this is the first time I'm here, and I'm here for that reason, because I can't sit back, and I don't think the Assembly can or should either, just assume that they have the expertise that we hope they have, but we know that we have it in this room.
Thank you.
Any further questions for Ms. Shivens? Thank you for your testimony. Next, we have Robert Venables. Please state your name and the area of town you live in for the record, and you have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, Assembly members.
Oh, sorry.
Here we go. All right.
Sorry.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, Assembly members. I'm Robert Venables. I'm a Valley resident. And first, I wanted to thank you all for not just passing the SEDS resolution for the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy, but for participating. Staff and members have been alongside of us for the last year and a half to create that. The last one brought in millions of dollars into this region, into the city, and so we expect that to move forward. Having said that, I want to make sure that my comments reflected are my own. Southeast Conference doesn't come and testify on a regular basis to any local issues unless invited. But since I was here for that, I noticed this resolution and I had not seen it before I walked in here today. I thought I'll stay a few more minutes and share a comment. Here we are. I have lived in a PCE community for over 30 years and worked for over 20 years on statewide strategies to lower and maintain low energy costs. I've watched with interest the rail belt utilities argue similar issues, what should be owned by the public and what's in the best interest of ratepayers and the public. I have no interest or knowledge of the RCA issues that are, I'm globally aware of them, but I have no opinion of that, and I want to be reflective of that. But I've seen ratepayers directly benefit from the public owning assets. I've seen utilities in the rail belt argue 180 degrees. They were very much opposed to the state owning assets, and now it's like they want the state to own even more assets. And Juneau has a very special thing with its rates right now. And it's been a great benefit to the economy here, the residents here, of which I am one. But it also helps the rest of the state and the rural communities, because the low rates that Juneau has and enjoys is the only reason why the rates are not higher in other communities, because of the way the PC rates are structured. And it's the average of Juneau, Anchorage, and Fairbanks, and the other communities are much higher. And so I would just urge you to continue the good policy of keeping the public assets owned by the public, and thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Venables? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Next, we have Duff Mitchell. Please state your name and the area of town you live in for the record, and you have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor, Assembly members. Duff Mitchell, Managing Director of Juneau Hydropower. I live in West Juneau. This resolution was interesting. It doesn't mention Juneau Hydropower, but you can hear by testimonies that it's very much involved with Juneau Hydropower. For 10 years, we've been trying to do an interconnect with the Snettisham line. And we have mediated, discussed, had lots of meetings, and it just never happened. We go to the RCA. ALP has admitted publicly they've spent over $1 million. I can tell you we've spent over $1 million having expert witnesses, real people with real knowledge on electrical. They say that it's a part of Snettisham. It is not. There's a bypass switch. It won't cost $300,000 a day because ALP can hit a button and it bypasses and disconnects Juneau Hydropower. That's the facts. So what does directly connected mean? Well, that substation that we're out there isn't the same as the terminal island that Lake Dorothy connected to. It is a virgin, brand new substation in the middle of nowhere that we have under FERC license as a project work on a FERC boundary with 404 permits, U.S. Forest Service permits, and whatnot. ALP intervened with the FERC. They should have spoke up and said that's not a good spot or we don't agree. They did not. The same thing goes with where was the CBJ if they want to get involved? Why didn't the CBJ look at the public notice? Oh, all the unions in town supported us. SEAC supported us. So there was a public notice. So these comments, and to say that they were shocked and surprised about the Snettisham interconnection, that's foolhardy. The whole reason that we were there in front of the RCA was because we needed an interconnection with Snettisham to wheel through Ada, to wheel through ALP systems so that we can take power to the Snettisham, which we will pay them $1 million a year, which will lower rates in Juneau. So therefore, thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Mitchell? Mr. Bryson?
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell, for coming this evening. I asked one of your colleagues what the consequences of the RCA ruling against you guys. Could you maybe speak just briefly to the consequences if Juneau Hydro was allowed to connect into this line? And say we got through the risk, what would be the outcome for Juneau if you were able to connect?
Assuming that we were given approval by the RCA and the ownership, if we don't own these assets and we have to pay for them, I didn't hear someone say we're going to buy you an interconnect or buy you a substation. These are multi-million-dollar operations. They're very expensive. They have communications. They have bypass switches. They're coming up from a submarine cable and going on to right below the Snettisham line. It's on FERC property. If we can't collateralize it, you can't get a loan on it. I dare say anyone who's in business, give me a car, you pay for it, and you just can make the payments. Well, if you can't collateralize that, it's kind of tough. And so that's the pickle that this resolution is trying to put us in. The other thing is directly connected. We're not directly connected. And so, you asked earlier about the consequences. I believe that, to answer it, it would make us come up with millions of dollars that we couldn't finance, that we'd have to pull out of our own pocket or raise additional capital that couldn't be financed. We're trying to finance this over 20, 30 years.
All right, Mr. Kelly?
Thank you. It's my understanding that one of the requirements that the RCA is considering is your expertise. And we did have a previous testifier who kind of who spoke to you only having potentially one lineman or other qualifications. I'm wondering, I'm sure that at some point the RCA, or you've argued before the RCA that you have the requisite expertise, and I was wondering if you could maybe share a little bit of that with us.
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, Juneau Hydropower isn't an operating company. We would obviously be having contractual arrangements for linemen. We'd have contractual arrangements by creating jobs in our community. But to your point, this issue has been spent half a day with the RCA talking about our fit, willing, and able. Are we able to not only financially fit, but can we manage and can we operate? And we've engaged EPS, which has an office in Juneau. They provide linemen for many utilities. They fly them in. We may have someone here living here in the future. We may contract with another contractor here in Juneau. That is part of the operations package after we build it. And we will have a robust operations and management system. The other thing in there that to our fit, willing, and able is that we're bringing in Ameresco that has built more megawatts and operates 682 megawatts, but they have more than Avista does in their entire empire. So the point is that we do have expertise, we have a deep bench, and we have a really good team. And to try to bring that here in one night is, kind of short-sighted when we've been talking about this since, the multiple hearings, the discovery, the briefs that have gone in through the RCA. I will allow the RCA, through their wisdom, to determine if we're fit, willing, and able, which they are also going to determine the interconnect, the transmission services, and the pole use agreements that ALMP will have to abide to because they are a certificated utility, just like us. And as a certificated utility, we have an obligation to serve the public.
Any more questions for Mr. Mitchell? Mr. Smith?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thanks, Mr. Mitchell. I guess I'm just going to ask you directly because I'm slightly confused on the different assets and the technology and the connections and all this stuff. If the RCA says, I guess, just looking for like equality or kind of fairness or whatever, would you be fine if your directly connected assets, similar to the directly connected assets of the Lake Dorothy hydroelectric project, were had the titles held by Ada? Essentially, same type of gear, ownership ends at the same time and same place or whatever. I mean, does that work for you? And if not, why not?
Well, the Lake Dorothy connection is completely different from us. They interconnected to an existing terminal. A line went into an existing terminal and they connected. So they directly connected. Their only direct connection is the line going in from Lake Dorothy. Those assets were originally, I think, financed by Ada, so it was all one and the same. Ours is completely separate. We have a FERC project work substation identified to us. The bypass switch that we are offering ALMP cuts off, and it's not an integral part of Snettisham. It's a substation that is physically near, but it is separate from ALMP. So the answer is yes, but they're different. The direct connection is that bypass switch, which I think is about $300,000 to $400,000 that we are paying for and basically giving to Ada. So that is the direct asset. Now, we don't want to connect our substation, which is ours. When I say connect, we want to connect it to line. We don't want it to be owned by someone else because we can't finance it that way. And this has been the bone of contention for 10 years.
Any further questions for Mr. Mitchell? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Okay, with that, we will bring it back to the assembly, and I think it's Ms. Hall.
I move the Assembly adopt Resolution 4011A, a resolution in support of continuity of ownership of Snettisham Hydroelectric Project assets, and ask for unanimous consent.
Is there any objection? Mr. Bryson? Ms. Wall?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will move to table this indefinitely. I think people will interpret that as me taking a side, and I hope this group knows that I am always on the side of good process. I do not like that this came to us on Friday. I think what I love about this assembly is we do our homework, we ask questions, we take time with things, we consider what is our business and what's not our business. We're going to be getting lots of requests for issues we don't know a lot about over the next few years to take up issues, and I don't want to set a precedent that that's what we spend our time doing. I don't want to vote. I don't want to vote yes for this. I don't want to vote no for this because I feel uninformed. Maybe you all spent your whole weekend understanding the complexities and talking to people. I did not. So I'm asking to not have to vote on this issue tonight. And I think this is not debatable.
Ms. Wall, I'm going to take a quick recess, 2 minutes, to talk to the attorney. I'll object. We can't speak to our objection, so Madam Clerk, we have a motion to table and we have objection. Please call the roll.
Yes.
Yes, correct.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So for resolution 4011 to be tabled indefinitely, Ms. Wall,
Yes.
Ms. Hall,
No.
Mr. Steininger,
No.
Ms. Adkisson,
No.
Mr. Kelly,
Yes.
Ms. Hughes Scandies,
No.
Mr. Bryson,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Smith,
No.
and Mayor Weldon.
No.
Motion fails, 3 yeas, 6 nays.
Okay, that brings us back to the motion. Do we have objection beside Mr. Bryson and Ms. Wall? Okay, Mr. Kelly.
Thank you. I object for the purpose of making an amendment. I move that we strike lines 41 through 43, the whereas clause that oh, I'm sorry. It's on page 210.
So say your motion again. So we're on page 210 of our packet.
Correct. So I move that on page 210 of our packet that we strike lines 41 through 43. This was the whereas clause that was mentioned by one of the previous testifiers as being potentially problematic.
Mr. Kelly, I couldn't hear you. Could you repeat what you just said?
I believe it was these lines that one of the previous testifiers specifically identified as being problematic for Juneau Hydropower. Yeah.
Okay, we have an amendment. Ms. Hughes Scandies, do we have an objection?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, I object to this amendment. I am sympathetic of the idea that people don't want to get involved in this. Removing this whereas, to me, starts to render this a bit moot. I think there are various pieces of these whereases that are fairly important if we are going to weigh in at all. And I think this one is particularly important. So if you were moving to strike this, I think you would be better served to vote against this resolution. I will be voting for this resolution, but I will limit my comments to the amendment. So I think this renders this pointless, and I will be voting against this amendment.
Thank you, Ms. Hughes Gaines. Mr. Kelly?
I move to withdraw my amendment.
Okay, we're back to the motion. Mr. Bryson, you weren't going to speak to your objection.
May I now?
Yes, you may. This is your one chance.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I wanted to kind of clarify, because I fully believe what Mr. Mesteg and Ms. Shivens were talking to us about, protecting the electrical system of Juneau. I absolutely want to do that. However, I cannot ignore what could be a $200 million economic project here in Juneau that it's not fly by night. They've been in our town for a decade trying to make this happen. If we interject here before the governing body, we could potentially be shutting down a project that could bring lots of power and lots of economics and lots of jobs to Juneau. There is a risk, but as we heard people saying, they're not just doing this haphazard. They are bringing in the experts. They're trying to do this right. No one's going to go try and build a $200 million dam and not get it right. Stopping them before they get an opportunity to have their say, to have it ruled on, the potential to Juneau, the potential of harming our electricity is something we need to pay attention to, but the potential, the future that this level of increased electricity, the first thing that comes to my mind are dock electrification. We need more power. If we interfere with it today, right now, it could be a long time before we see additional power come to Juneau. So while I am very aware of ALMP's concern for the protection of their electric transmission line, we would be foolish to not be concerned with that. Shutting down a major project should not be one of the goals of this assembly. I'm going to maintain my objection, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to speak? Ms. Hughes Gaines.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will speak briefly to my support of this resolution. I will say that I think we are best served when we limit our weighing in on items where Juneau, it is most appropriate for Juneau. I try to be sparse in my resolutioning. I find this to be meaningful because it is such critical infrastructure to the community. I will say, I will try to keep my comments limited to what needs to be said tonight. I have spent time this weekend. I do have opinions about the qualifications about Ada. I do have opinions about many pieces of this. There have been references to this project being in development for 10 years, for 12 years. I have been on the assembly for 7 years. So this is not my first time doing a little bit of refereeing, I guess, between these two entities. I agree that is not our place. I will just say that because I think this is critical infrastructure, because the whereases I don't think go too far, and the resolution I do not think goes too far. I think this is a perfect example of where if we want to use our voice, this would be an appropriate time to use it. So I will be supporting it.
Mr. Kelly, you've already got to speak. Anybody else want to speak? Mr. Steininger.
So I want to say that I'm going to vote in support of this resolution, but I will say somewhat begrudgingly for a lot of the reasons that Ms. Wall brought up. just feeling like this was a very short amount of time to come up to speed on a complicated issue. But ultimately, as I spoke to people over the weekend, spoke to people today, learned more about this, the limited amount that I could in a weekend, the continuity of ownership, those issues were compelling enough for me to feel like I needed to support this resolution, but I do not feel that my vote in support of this resolution is a vote against the Juneau Hydropower project. It is simply a vote in support of the need for that continuity of ownership in a critical public asset. And I truly hope that the individuals running that project understand that I do support the project. I want to see more power come into Juneau. It's just the information that I've been able to receive over the last 48 hours has put me in a position where I feel like I need to, since we are making a decision on this, since we have to vote on this, that I will have to support this resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Steininger. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Pretty similar comments to Mr. Steininger. Just to remind us what this is essentially a fancy letter to the RCA. We're flagging an issue that they oversaw or didn't think about, whatever. There's concerns. I hear them from Juneau Hydropower, on the directly connected piece. We're just saying, look at this piece. There's a similar situation with Lake Dorothy. I understand it's not the same. Take a look at this issue. There's a public purpose and reason for it. We're sending a resolution, and by voting for the resolution, we're not trying to shut down Juneau Hydropower. We're essentially just sending a fancy letter. So I'll support it as well. Thanks.
Any further comment? Mr. Kelly, you want to weigh in one last time? Or are you done? All right, I will just briefly comment. I'm in support, but I'm in support of connectivity also. However, Ms. Shivens kind of said it, this is the one time as leaders of our ratepayers that we probably need to speak up. And I know the timing isn't perfect, but we need to have this to the RCA by June 11th. So we just are out of time pretty much for that. So we need to have this on the record for that. So with that, we have a motion and objection. Madam Clerk, will you call roll?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. For passage of Resolution 4011, Ms. Hall,
Yes.
Mr. Kelly,
Yes.
Ms. Wall,
Yes.
Ms. Atkinson,
Yes.
Ms. Hughes Candies,
Yes.
Mr. Bryson,
No.
Mr. Steininger,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Smith,
Yes.
and Mayor Weldon.
Yes.
Motion passes, 8 yeas, 1 nay.
Do the assembly, do we want to keep powering through or do we need a break? Okay. So next, Mr. Yucatel, we go to 56 regulations. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is Regulations, Title 05 CVJ AC 15.030, Dock Fees and Charges.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Madam Manager.
These regulations proposed an increase of dockage fees for cruise ships to $7 per lower berth. Previous rates were .065 per registered ton and 3.58 per lineal foot for vessels over 250 passengers. This represents a significant increase in dockage revenues and seeks to make CVJ dock rates more competitive with the private sector and with other facilities in Southeast Alaska. It was reviewed by the Assembly Finance Committee on January 4, 2025, and was approved by the Docks and Harbors Board on April 24, 2025. I recommend the Assembly approve these regulation changes.
Thank you, Madam Manager. Is there anybody wishing to speak to this regulation? And we do have the Port Director here if anybody has questions. With that, we'll move it to the assembly. Mr. Kelly.
I move that the Assembly adopt the regulation amendments for Title 5, Chapter 15, Fees and Charges, and ask for unanimous consent.
Any objection? Ms. Hughes Gandes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have just a quick question for staff, and I'm sorry I didn't catch this earlier. I'm on page 303 of the packet, and I do not have an encyclopedic mind of what the cruise ship schedules have been the last 2 years, but I bet Ms. Pierce knows and the managers probably know. What have we been doing for those ships that have been here in April and October the last 2 years, or this year and the last year? Or am I hallucinating and those ships are not here in April and October?
Apparently you get Director Pierce. Ms. Pierce.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and Assembly Member Hughes Scandies. I did not bring my computer up with me, so I do not have the regulation in front of me. However, we charge regular dockage fees in April and October. We will not have ships in April and October starting in 2026.
So it's not going to be a thing in the future, even though we're changing the regulation? Okay, thank you. I was just curious how wild, if it was wildly different for those, and I know it's not that many ships, but thank you. I remove my objection.
All right, any further objection? Seeing none, those regulations pass. Thank you for your patience, both to the Director Pierce and Port Director Ucatel. Next, we go to item 57. Mr. Bryson, and I believe someone has to recuse themselves.
It is with deep embarrassment that turning 65 kind of snuck up on me, and so I was a little late in filing, and so this is, I will recuse myself. So I guess I sit here and say nothing.
You get to step out and go to the restroom.
You can walk Call her name.
Mr. Bryson.
Miss Hall, everybody's just really jealous that you have a property tax exemption. Madam Mayor, there are 6 property owners that have requested the Assembly authorize the assessor to consider a late filed exemption to their property assessments. The Assembly has separately reviewed each request from Harry Brett Dillingham, Maureen Hall, Diane McHenry, Victoria Porter, Luke Bryant, and Lise Paradis. We have determined that each has met the criteria for the assessor. I move the Assembly accepts these late filed exemptions and refer them to the assessor, and I ask for unanimous consent.
Any objection? Seeing none, that motion passes.
We'd like to invite Ms. Hall back to the
Ms. Hall?
dais.
Hopefully she didn't go far. Mr. Bryson, would you check on her, please?
Eddies?
Next, that brings us to item 58. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is Resolution 4008, a resolution de-appropriating up to $199,000 from the manager for contingency federal staffing support related to tourism, funding provided by state marine passenger fees.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Madam Manager.
This resolution was requested by Assemblymember Paul Kelly for consideration of the body. Ordinance 2024-01 BAL proposed to appropriate $200,000 to the manager for contingency staffing support related to tourism at federally managed facilities. This resolution proposes to de-appropriate half of the appropriation, $100,000, back to the state marine passenger fee fund. Because Ordinance 2024-01 BAL passed, this resolution is still relevant. I recommend against adopting this resolution.
All right, is there any member of the public that wishes to speak to this resolution? Or one member of the public? Probably not. Okay, we'll bring it to you, Mr. Kelly.
Madam Mayor, I think I'll leave it to the rest of the assembly. I did find that the way the resolution was, that the ordinance was titled prevented me from amending the ordinance down to a number that I would have supported. This resolution is a little bit more flexible. If somebody else wants to move it, then I would support that. But since that ordinance failed 6-3, I won't be the one to be moving this ordinance.
So you're not going to move it? All right. Any further action to the body on this item? Going to staff reports. Madam Clerk, or Madam Manager.
Staff reports.
I'm looking at the clerk, but nobody moved it, so we're moving on, correct? Go ahead. You have any staff reports? All right, thank you. So assembly reports, mayor's report, I'm gonna keep mine very, very short because we have still items to do tonight. I'm just giving everybody a heads up if you haven't read your email that somebody asked us to extend the Telephone Hill move out date from October 1st to November 1st. So that's an item in our introduction. So when we talk about that next time, we will be talking about that date. So other than that, thanks everybody for no, it's my turn to talk. I'll come back to you. Other than that, thanks for people who have jumped in for me when I have been sick and out of town, and we look forward to being back here for a bit, hopefully well. So with that, Madam Manager, do you have anything?
Right, just a point of clarification. Are you requesting the manager's office bring you back something? We are sending out notices this week for to Telephone Hill residents.
2-minute Eddies. Page. So notices will go out to the tenants. If we do anything on June 9th, we'll just add an addendum to those notices. With that, I am done, and we will go to Mr. whatever your name is, Mr. Smith for Committee of the Whole.
Madam Mayor, I think everyone was there, well, mostly. We, at the last committee of the whole, we discussed the Mendenhall Glacier Visitor Center operation appropriating ordinance as well as the resolution, both of which passed tonight. We talked about Telephone Hill next steps and provided direction to the manager. We took questions and just for potential follow-up for ranked choice voting, an ordinance potentially moving us to ranked choice voting. And we discussed body-worn camera ordinance, of which we also just passed tonight. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Ms. Wall, Finance? We've been busy.
We've been busy. You all remember several days ago. I will, and we'll be back on Wednesday at 5:30. And we are going to pass on a budget to the full assembly at that point. We'll also talk about seasonal sales tax. 2 notes. In your Friday report, finance staff have provided you a mill rate tool that allows you to play with the mill rate and what changing it would mean. So that will be our big decision on Wednesday. So go check that out if you haven't yet. And then on seasonal sales tax, my hope is that we can, if we are going to move forward, that we'll have a solid proposal in terms of the percentages that we would want to see. And, the exemptions we'd want to include. We will then still have time to decide whether we want to put it on the ballot, but I want to get us to the place of a proposal. And a few members reached out about having some ideas, so we'll have a starting place, but do your homework, go back through the memos. If you have questions for staff on running numbers, do that work before Wednesday so that we're prepared to do that. That's it for me.
Thank you. Lands, Housing, and Economic Development, Mr. Bryson.
We had a marathon meeting last Monday where we covered it was 7 topics in 1 hour. That was pretty good for lands, but I didn't have my notes to tell you exactly what each of those items are. I'm sure that we dealt with them in this packet. So.
There you go. Ms. Hughes Candies, Public Works.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We canceled the May 5th Public Works meeting due to lack of need. And I probably already reported on the April 21st, but if I didn't, we talked about the lone sailor statue, which will come back to you someday, and check valves related to the flooding.
Thank you, Ms. Hughes Candies. Ms. Atkinson, Human Resources, you have some nominations for us.
I do, and some dates we have to talk about after. But first, I will move to the PrAC, the reappointment of Josh Anderson, Paulette Shermer, and Danica Swanson, all to terms beginning May 1st, 2025, and ending April 30th, 2028. And I ask for unanimous consent.
Any objection? Seeing none, they are appointed.
And then last appointee for the Douglas Advisory Board, I move the appointment of Carmen Catas to the Douglas Advisory Board for an unexpired term beginning immediately and ending September 30th, 2025, followed by a full term beginning October 1st, 2025, and ending September 30th, 2028. And I ask for unanimous consent.
Any objection? Seeing none, she, right, is appointed.
And then the last thing I have is we are looking at empowered board interview dates. The dates that we sort of narrowed down to are the week of the 23rd of June, with hopefully an inclusion for June 25th, as I would like to not do that for personal reasons. So I think a couple of dates that we looked at were the 23rd on Monday and the 26th on Thursday, trying to set up a couple just in case there's a need for 2. Mm-hmm. No, that's not what my packet says. It's not what my packet says. Anyway.
Any preference? Ms. Hughes Candies.
I will be helping a family member with a surgery who's getting surgery on June 23rd, so 26th. I assume I would be more available, but just to flag, I may not be available for either one of those.
And it's for 3 boards. I think we might need 2 nights.
Airport, Docks and Harbors, Eagle Crest, and then there is 1 planning commission seat as well that recently came up.
Yes, I think you need more than one night for all those, because we're gonna have tons of applicants.
Yes, exactly. Madam
Ms.
Mayor.
Wall is looking at me skeptically, but we will. June 3rd, 23rd? Okay. So take that in account, Ms. Atkinson?
Do the clerks need more? No? All right, I'll take it to account.
Okay. With that, okay. We want liaison reports and comments and questions done in 15 minutes because we still have an executive session to do. So keep it fast. Mr. Bryson?
Short-term rental committee finished voting on regulations, and we will now be discussing that and public testimony at our next short-term rental task force meeting. That is all I have for you today, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Bryson. Ms. Hughes Candies?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Airport Board has been focused on the hiring of the airport manager. The airport manager hiring committee has been busy, thanks to the contributions of the manager's office and some dedicated airport board members. We will be conducting interviews this week, so stay tuned to see what happens after that.
Are any members of the public invited to any of these interviews?
Next stage. This is the first.
First stage?
This is first stage. This is just the hiring committee. JCOS has been meeting quite subcommittee-y, and so I wasn't at their last regular, but I attended one of their subcommittees, so they're busy as JCOS always is.
Thank you for that. Ms. Wall? Save your voice.
Yeah, I think I'm good tonight.
Thank you. Ms. Atkinson?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Due to work obligations, I was not able to make the latest LEPC or chamber meetings, but the Systematic Racism Review Committee did meet to discuss the body-worn cameras ordinance, which we heard their comments at the committee of the whole.
I think we incorporated them. Okay. Mr. Steininger?
The Bartlett Board met. Their main conversation or topic of conversation had to be delayed, so it was basically just an update on hospital operations. The Eagle Crest Board met the day after our last Finance Committee meeting, had a pretty in-depth conversation on the next steps now that we have put forward a budget for approval that grants them a lot of what they're asking for, and now they actually have to operate on that. So very robust discussion on that. And the PrAC met and got an update on aquatics. And I'll note in the nominations for the three, or the motion for the three members, there's still one empty seat on the PrAC, if you know anyone.
Okay, thank you for that. One empty seat. Ms. Hall?
Juneau School District, their board meeting was on this past Tuesday. They passed the bell-to-bell cell phone policy for all K through 12. There was over 1 hour of public testimony on their negotiations. JCOA meets tomorrow, Juneau Commission on Aging. On the agenda is housing update, rec and wellness, and planning work group. I will be talking to them about a PrAC appointee from the pickleball crowd, perhaps.
Thank you. Mr. Kelly?
Thank you. I attended the last CSWA meeting on the 7th. The next one will be on the 4th. The last Juneau Housing and Homelessness Coalition meeting this month was canceled, but I haven't had the chance to talk about the previous one in April since then. Basically a lot of the community partners, I think it can easily be summarized as we're all experiencing some difficulties and trepidation with the reductions in federal funding. That has had a direct impact, for example, on Gastineau Human Services with their 51-unit project, and is anticipated to cause delays. Travel Juneau has not, they only meet quarterly. Their next meeting is actually scheduled later this week on the 22nd at 2 p.m. in the Travel Juneau offices. I also kind of wanted to, Ms. Hughes-Gandy's report also reminded me that I actually kind of liked having the Public Works Committee meeting held separately from the other two meetings. It gave me more time to consider the issues. And I think when it's kind of packed in there, when we're considering potentially three committees, and we have the COW, we have the Public Works, and lands all in one day, that's a lot of information to consider. I feel like I can pay better attention to the issues by maybe spacing our meetings out a little bit more. So I just wanted to bring that forward as a suggestion that the Assembly might consider, and I'll close my comments there.
I'll leave that up to the chair. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Docks and Harbors at their last meeting considered the regulation changes that we passed tonight. They're looking at replacing this anyway, and then also got an update on the Aurora Harbor Phase 4 schedule, and discussed board vacancies and recruitment. JEDC mostly was focused on their FY26 work plan, and that is what I had to report, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. And we had several people testify about the, some of the homeless issues in general going on right now, which has been going on for a while. So I wanted to ask on the record, the attorney, a couple of questions. Number one, trespassing, how does that work when you have private property and you want somebody trespassed? How does that work?
Sure. So if it's private property, you want someone trespassed, you would one, you can put up signs, which we would encourage everyone to do. Two, you contact Juneau Police Department and serve a letter to that person to be trespassed. It has to be signed by the person in charge of the building. So if it's the Glory Hall, they have designated people who are in charge. And then whoever you are trespassing has to be given that letter and be told that they are not allowed to be there anymore.
Okay, thank you. And one of the other concerns they have is that people are walking around with knives and on their belt and stuff. Can we enforce anything there?
In general, no. People in Alaska have a right to, actually, we have a right to open carry guns. We can have guns, we can have knives, we can have weapons. Whether we're homeless or not, we're treated exactly the same. But it's the behavior with those items that will get someone in trouble. So if someone is threatening or if someone is intimidating, we would encourage them to call the Juneau Police Department immediately, not an hour later, immediately. And the police can come and hopefully de-escalate the situation and refer charges if necessary.
All right, so I spurred some questions, so Ms. Hughes Gandes and then Mr. Bryson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. For Madam Manager, this is the second or third time we've heard from members of the public who say the police want to do what's right and you won't let them, or they just think our policies are awful and you need to stop holding them back. And also speaking to whether the law department is enforcing our ordinances or not. I will follow up with the chief of police, but do you have anything to say about that? I know the chief has been involved in all of our conversations, I presume, following the Grants Pass decision. So it feels like there's a little bit of a disconnect there, but I also know they're understaffed. So do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, I will just say that the manager's office has offered guidance to all of our departments that interact with the unsheltered population that was carefully crafted to try to strike that balance between allowing people to be on public lands as long as they're not, harming others or threatening others, and also being able to move and disrupt break up those camps when the number of people or the impact becomes such that it has a disproportionate negative impact. And that's a very difficult balance to strike, and it's very objective, and different people have different interpretations of but that is the guidance that our officers and our parks rangers and others are operating under. And so it is definitely, it's difficult.
Thank you. Mr. Bryson. Oh, sorry.
Madam Mayor, I'm really sorry. I did not want to prolong this meeting anymore, but there is a gap between what Madam Attorney just said and what the police on the ground are implementing. There's just a gap. We're talking theoretical here, but the real situation that all of you could go see is Teal Street. They have popped up like camps, but it's not just one camp. There's like 4 different stations of camps. I had to walk through it today, and a guy was laid out on the sidewalk, and I did have to walk around him. I'm pretty sure he was asleep because he did not even move when I walked by this guy. That was during the daylight. I've had to walk through that. It's a little thing that connects the airport to Teal Street. That path has been there for a very long time. You can't go there at night to try and walk. There's a dozen tents right now that are in that area that are disrupting the valley commerce and the businesses that are in that area. That's why they were all here today, because it's a growing tent city. And every time people have said, hey, this isn't working, it's too close, it's on top of my property, there is human waste, there is trash all around it. And it's what has enraged all of these people. Imagine having your home next to that campment. It's just horrible to walk past it. And the police are saying, we can't do anything. We're not moving them. They're not disturbing anybody right now. And that is absolutely not the case. That's where I say there's the gap between what the attorney's saying and the police. Drive by the corner of Teal Street, try to walk over the airport, you'll see exactly what they're talking about. It is as bad as what they were trying to present today. It's getting worse. Sorry, Madam Mayor, I'll stop.
Thank you. Madam Attorney, do you have something to add?
Sure, thank you, and I'll be respectful of the fact that it's 10:30. So first of all, I just, to give a little bit of background information, there are 2 prosecuting agencies in the CBJ. So there is the city attorney's office and there's the state office. Sometimes, most of the time, the city prosecutes almost all misdemeanors, but not all the time. Any felony, so if there are weapons involved, would go to the state office. So I want to be very clear that gets lumped together. And also, I thought it would be important for you to know the city attorney's office, we have 2 prosecutors. We prosecute between 1,200 and 1,600 cases a year. And that spans, our homeless population, our non-homeless population. I would say, I'm happy to get the numbers. We have a lot of really wonderful people in this community, but we have a lot of people that commit crimes that we're responding to. And we do get repeat offender homeless people. It's often trespass. We do pursue those cases if we can meet the criminal elements, which is what our ethical obligation is under the law. If we can't meet the elements of a crime, we will drop that case. We're required to do that. And so there are lots of reasons. I'm always happy to talk to community members and assembly members about a particular case and what's going on. And I would just encourage you to remember the homeless population is very, very visible. I too have walked past Teal Street, but just because 20, 30 people are visible doesn't mean that the police aren't doing something, prosecutors aren't doing something. The criminal justice system is woefully inadequate at responding to homelessness. And so we're happy to continue doing what we're doing, but I do think it's important for me to advocate for both JPD and my staff that we are pursuing actions when we can.
All right, with that, Ms. Hughes-Candies.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll keep it very brief because now I think we're properly getting to 10:30, but I would just, based on some of the things I have heard here tonight in this chamber, invite everyone to imagine what it would be like if you were homeless and part of that population. A vast majority, I don't know if vast majority might be overstating it a little bit because a lot of people in Juneau have money, but the vast majority of the American population is about a paycheck or 2 from becoming homeless. There, you would still need to go to the bathroom. You would likely want a weapon if you were sleeping underneath somewhere. I will take the time to make sure I visit that area, but I imagine that I would be able to walk around those tents at night. And at this point in time, I don't think that I would feel for my safety very much as I deal with a significant amount of the unhoused population downtown, and they are Juneau residents just like you or I. So I will stop there, but I think it is very important that we remember those are Juneau residents and we serve them as well as serving the folks here. And I share the frustration, and I am frustrated with the federal government and the state government because Juneau can't do this all alone, and homelessness is a nationwide problem. So I will leave it there.
All right, thank you, Ms. Hughes Candies, and I toured that area today too. We have moved tents out of the woods. They are lined up in a nice little row across the street from the Glory Hall. I have pictures if anybody wants to look at them, but we'll save this, we'll continue this discussion another day because it's far from over. So with that, we have 2 members of the public that have sat here the whole time. Do either of you want to speak to anything? We'll give you a couple minutes. So we're in continuation of public participation of non-agenda items. Yep. So please state your name and area of town you live in for the record, and you have 2 minutes.
And I need to press this button?
Yes.
I'm good to go. Thank you. Good evening. Thank you very much. And as I respect everyone's time, first, congratulations on the endurance. I am arrived here in 2022. It's quite literally like living in a postcard. This place is gorgeous. And the responsibility to take care of it is imperative. So thank you for your efforts. I have had a few careers here, and one of them included, and I will announce my anonymity for a period of time. I had the pleasure of cleaning the Porta-Johns.
Sir, before you continue, we need your name.
Oh,
For the
forgive me.
record, sorry. Name?
First name Harold, last name Wissell, Wissell. I am resident in Douglas Harbor.
Okay.
So, simple, I was just simply saying that homelessness is, as you stated, a nationwide problem and potentially globally. We have possible resources, and I really like the comment about you all reflecting on comments made as well as researching the severity of all the dynamics of what we call society. So I will only simply say that there's a couple of things that come to mind. Utilities are the infrastructure, and so therefore the details are imperative. I try not to weigh the political lines. I will simply say that there are documentaries that I enjoy sharing portions of because they tend to have a lean one way or the other. For Love of Water, Flow is a documentary on water, but it covers utilities, and there's a severe disparity or gap in how cities are brought into infrastructure, and then the money that went into that is not maintained. So that's just a resource. The other resource I'd like to bring forward is a document, a book written by Napoleon Hill, the original unedited version, Think and Grow Rich. I'd like to strongly recommend that for review.
And what was the name of that second book?
The book is Napoleon Hill's, the author of Think and Grow Rich. I recommend the 1937 unedited version. First 4 paragraphs talk about education.
Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you for hanging out with us all
I
night.
wanted to express that this is a big issue, and getting right down to the core values is where we need to start baseline communication. So, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, with that, Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Oh, wait, sorry.
Do not need an executive session this evening.
Yay! We're adjourned.